Chapter 29:38. Even more, Trash Xiao Qin glared at Nie Tian, his eyes cold and murderous. "So what if it's me?" Nie Tian replied calmly. Since the people of the Xintian dynasty thought that he was the one who took Jing Yue away, he might as well admit it. "It's you. You deserve to die." Xiao Qin's gaze turned cold as killing intent gushed forth from his eyes. After that, his silhouette flickered as his aura gushed forth frenziedly, blasting against the space around him. It was extremely violent. "Imperial brother, watch carefully. I'm going to kill the person who stole your woman." Xiao Qin shouted in midair. "Furthermore, I'm going to forcefully take his woman. That little girl is not bad. She suits my taste." "Huh?" Nie Tian's eyes darkened when he heard Xiao Qin's words, and his expression changed. This Xiao Qin actually dared to profane Shui. Boom! In the next moment, Nie Tian released his sword aura, and his sword intent soared into the sky. Even though he knew he wasn't Xiao Qin's match, he wouldn't retreat even half a step. "Let me." But right at this moment, Shui-Er's voice rang out. After that, her silhouette moved. Her white robes were whiter than snow as she flashed through the air. "Little girl, don't think that you could defeat me just because you defeated my good-for-nothing brother." Xiao Qin looked at Cher and smiled cold. He said loudly, "I'm not someone that good-for-nothing crown prince can compare to." He said that Xiao Tang had used two good-for-nothings. Xiao Tang heard it clearly from the side, and his expression was uglier than if he had eaten **T. He was Xiao Qin's brother and the crown prince of the Xintian dynasty, but he was being humiliated like this. How could he not be angry? "He's good for nothing, and so are you." Shui stood in midair, and the corners of her lips curled up into a smile. A rare hint of anger appeared on her gentle face, and her beautiful eyes sank slightly. A strand of sword intent appeared in her palm, and then she raised her arm, causing sword intent to shoot out from the tip of her finger. Swoosh! The sword intent was extremely sharp, and it pierced through the air like a meteor, drawing a bright red line in the air. However, there was a sharp aura hidden within this resplendence. Xiao Qin's eyes narrowed when he felt the sharp qi rushing towards him. He immediately circulated all the energy in his body, and a golden shield appeared around him. Pooh! Immediately after, the crimson sword light struck and pierced through the golden shield around Xiao Qin's body. It was so easy, it was as if it wasn't a golden shield, but a layer of paper. Pooh! Puffed. In the next instant, the scarlet sword light split into two and flew past Xiao Qin's face, leaving a sword mark on both sides of his face. Everything happened in an instant. Xiao Qin's body froze on the spot, unable to react for a long time. When Nie Tian saw this, his eyes narrowed and he was shocked. Cher's control over sword intent had simply reached the pinnacle of perfection. It was just a small sword light, yet it had easily broken through Xiao Qin's defense and left two sword scars on his face. Her precise control over sword intent was indeed amazing. What was even more terrifying was that even Nie Tian couldn't tell how powerful Shui-Er's battle prowess was. Cher had attacked several times, but she had only injured her opponent and not killed him. Although this method was merciful, it was more difficult than killing someone directly. Furthermore, Snow had yet to draw her sword, and she was only using her sword intent in an extremely restrained manner. It was hard to predict how terrifying Cher's combat power would be if she used the god-slaying sword and fully released her sword intent. Xiao Qin's cultivation was the same as Cher's, and he was obviously not a mediocre person. However, he could not fight back against Cher at all. If Cher wanted to kill him, even if he had 1,000 lives, he would have died a long time ago. "You're even more useless than your brother," Cher said coldly as she retracted her sword intent and glanced at Xiao Qin with a proud and aloof gaze. Xiao Qin's words had angered her. Otherwise, she would not have been so angry. Ha 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 ha. On the other side, there was a sudden burst of laughter. Xiao Tang's face was wild with joy as he said loudly, "Xiao Qin, is this how you stand up for your brother?" Although Xiao Tang wanted to kill Nie Tian, he did not want Nie Tian to die in the hands of others, especially not Xiao Qin. Therefore, he was very happy that Shao Qin had been humiliated. "Shut up." Shao Qin stood there. Xiao Tang's voice was like a steel needle piercing into his heart, making him feel his blood boil. He suddenly looked at Xiao Tang and roared. Xiao Tang looked at Shao Qin and actually felt the murderous intent from the latter. His face stiffened, and he did not dare to make a sound. He felt that if he continued to laugh, Shao Qin might really kill him. "You brat, you forced me to do this." The next moment, Shao Qin's expression changed. His eyes were extremely vicious, and one of his eyes suddenly turned a strange scarlet color. Nie Tian saw this, and his eyes suddenly froze. He exclaimed in surprise, "Other pupils." He did not expect Shao Qin to be a martial artist with other pupils. Shao Qin's mother was Empress Xiantian, who possessed the illusion blood eyes of the night. Therefore, it was not strange that Shao Qin had other pupils. However, Nie Tian felt that Shao Qin's other pupil's aura was very strange. It should not be the illusion blood eyes of the night. One of Shao Qin's eye sockets suddenly widened, and the space around him turned scarlet. It was as if he had used his eye power to open a boundary. Cher looked at Shao Qin. Her pretty face did not change, as if she did not care at all. "Go to hell." In the next moment, Shao Qin let out a ferocious roar, and his figure instantly moved. He was like a bloody ray of light, directly attacking Cher. Cher stood where she was, and the sword intent in her body surged out. It was as red as blood, and it seemed to solidify around her body. "Stop! Stop now!" However, at this moment, two voices rang out in the air at almost the same time. Shao Qin's expression changed slightly in midair, but his eyes instantly returned to normal. His figure paused, and he stopped. Seeing this, Cher dispersed the sword intent around her. The two of them stopped in time, avoiding a head-on clash. In the next moment, two figures landed behind Shao Qin and Nie Tian. "Queen Mother." Shao Qin turned to look at the person behind him and bowed deeply in reverence. The person standing behind him was none other than the Empress of the Xiantian dynasty, his mother, Shao Lin. On the other side, Nie Tian turned and smiled at the person in front of him. He said, "Elder Hua." Hua Yiru was standing behind him. The two voices just now had come from Shao Lin and Hua Yiru. Empress Mother, Shao Qin. Right at this moment, Shao Tang arrived beside Shao Lin and complained in a threatening manner. However, he had just opened his mouth when Shao Lin glared at him, causing him to swallow the rest of his words and retreat to the side in fright. Then, Shao Lin's beautiful eyes flashed. She looked at Hua Yiru and said, "Mr. Hua, long time no see. Long time no see, Your Majesty." Hua Yiru smiled faintly, his eyes shining with a strange light. Seeing this, Nie Tian couldn't help but be taken aback. Chapter 29:39. A friendly reminder. Nie Tian looked at Hua Yiru and Shao Lin, unable to hide his surprise. He hadn't expected the two to know each other. "Mr. Hua, I heard that you're a teacher at Saint Soul Academy. Is that true?" Shao Lin asked with a faint smile. "It's true." Hua Yiru nodded and laughed. "I'm an adult and just want to find a place to settle down." "Oh." Shao Lin had a strange look in her eyes. In this Empress' eyes, Mr. Hua isn't someone who craves stability. The ancestor once invited Mr. Hua to be the state preceptor of the Xiantian dynasty, but Mr. Hua mercilessly refused. "Why do you want to stay at Saint Soul Academy and be a mere teacher now?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed at Shao Lin's words. It turned out that Hua Yiru and the ancestor of the Xiantian dynasty had met before, and they were on good terms. Otherwise, the ancestor wouldn't have made Hua Yiru the state preceptor of the Xiantian dynasty. Unfortunately, Hua Yiru had refused the ancestor. No wonder Hua Yiru knew about the meteorite stone in the Xiantian mystery land. Times have changed. Hua Yiru smiled faintly. "Well said." Shao Lin's eyes trembled. The #1 God Pill Master of the Holy Soul region is actually willing to be a teacher at Saint Soul Academy. Times have changed. What #1 God Pill Master? Her Majesty thinks too highly of me. Hua Yiru laughed and waved his hand. Nie Tian frowned, and the way he looked at Hua Yiru changed. He knew that Hua Iru was a god pill master, but he didn't expect him to be the #1 god pill master of the Holy Soul region. However, Hua Iru didn't seem to agree with the title of #1 god pill master. Mr. Hua, do you also know Nietian? At this time, Shaolin turned her gaze to Nietian and asked in a deep voice. Nietian is a student of Saint Soul Academy. Of course I know him. Hua Iru smiled. Mr. Hua, not long ago, Nietian entered the mysterious sky mystery realm and took away the meteorite stone. Is this related to you? Shaolin's beautiful eyes narrowed. She smiled and asked directly. Ah, Hua Iru exclaimed in surprise. When did this happen? Why doesn't I know about it? As he spoke, he looked at Nietian with an angry expression and scolded. Nietian, did you really take the heavenly meteorite stone? Nietian was amused in his heart. This old monster's acting skills were quite good. Since Hua Iru was acting, Nietian naturally had to cooperate. He felt wronged and said, Elder Hua, I took the heavenly meteorite stone with the permission of the mysterious heaven ancestor. Her Majesty was there at the time and saw it with her own eyes. Nietian, you... Shaolin's pretty face stiffened. She was so angry that she couldn't speak. When Nietian said that she saw it with her own eyes, he was clearly saying that she was trash. She actually watched someone else take away the heavenly meteorite stone. Eyebrows furrowed, Nietian asked, Your Majesty, don't tell me that you've forgotten what Patriarch Profound Heaven said to you. You're not forgetting things, Your Majesty. Nietian, this Empress knows very well what the ancestor said. There's no need for you to remind me. Shaolin's eyes turned cold as she said in a deep voice. It's good that you remember. I was just reminding you out of goodwill. I was afraid that Your Majesty would accidentally forget. Nietian chuckled with a proud expression. Your Majesty, if there's nothing else, we'll take our leave. Then, Hua Iru smiled faintly and took a step forward. I won't see you out. Shaolin knew that she couldn't attack Nietian and the others, so she replied in a cold manner. Your Majesty, this brat took away my woman. The girl next to him left a sword mark on my face to humiliate me. Are we just going to let it go? Xiao Tang shouted anxiously when he saw that Nietian was about to leave. Pa! As soon as he finished speaking, a crisp slap sounded on his face, directly turning half of his face into a bloody mess. Your Majesty, Xiao Tang looked at Shaolin in shock. He didn't know what he had done wrong. Idiot! Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough? Shaolin shouted in a low voice. Her eyes were cold and cold. Xiao Tang was so scared that his expression froze. He didn't dare to say anything else. Your Majesty is teaching your son a lesson. We won't disturb you anymore. Goodbye. Nietian smiled and turned to leave. Shaolin looked in the direction where Nietian and the others left. Her pretty face was so gloomy that it looked like it was about to drip blood. Your Majesty, are you really going to swallow this? Shaoqin took a step forward and said cautiously, So what if I can't swallow it? Do you want this Empress to disobey the ancestors' orders? Shaolin shouted in a low voice. There was a strange look in her eyes. Shaoqin raised his head and looked at Shaolin. He didn't dare to say anything else. Nietian, the girl next to you is very interesting. Shaolin's eyes flashed with a dark light. She laughed sinisterly in her mind. If this Empress isn't wrong, she should be from the ancient Ming race. And her relationship with the Emperor of the Netherworld must be unusual. This Empress is very curious. What kind of expression would Dean Saint Soul have if he knew the girl's true identity? The Emperor of the Netherworld of the ancient Ming race is someone on the Holy Soul Sin Tablet. It turned out that Shaolin had seen through Cher's identity the moment she made her move. Nietian and the others left with Hua Iru. Hua Iru brought them to a barren land outside of the Arctic Snow Mountain. Nietian, did your trip to the Bitter Sea horizon go smoothly? Hua Iru landed and looked at Nietian. Yes, it went smoothly. Nietian nodded and smiled. He had already gotten what he wanted. There was no need to say more about the hardships he had gone through. In that case, you should already know my identity. Hua Iru said with a smile. I know. Nietian nodded. He naturally understood that Hua Iru was referring to the ancestor of the Cloud Buddha, Sher family. However, Tian was curious as to why the ancestor of the cloud Buddha Shur family was surnamed Hua instead of Shur. Hua Yiru nodded and looked at Wei Kong and Shur Lulan. Finally, his gaze landed on Shur Lulan. He couldn't conceal the concern in his eyes as he asked, "Miss, you are from the cloud Buddha Shur family, right? What's your name?" "Senior. This junior is Shur Lulan." Shur Lulan bowed respectfully. "This junior is Wei Kong." Wei Kong also bowed respectfully. Hua Yiru nodded and didn't say anything else. However, his gaze lingered on Wei Kong for a moment. He didn't expect Wei Kong to be from the Seven Knights Wei family. Hua Yiru turned to look at Cher with a strange expression. "Miss, may I know how to address you?" "I am Cher." Cher nodded in response. Her voice was soft and her eyes were timid, as if she was afraid of Hua Yiru. "Cher." Tian took a step forward and held Cher's hand when he saw her reaction. Cher looked at Tian and clenched her fists. Her expression was much calmer. Chapter 2940. An opportunity Tian could not help but frown when he saw Hua Yiru's strange expression and asked, "Elder Hua, are you all right?" "I'm fine." Hua Yiru was taken aback for a moment before his expression returned to normal and he forced a smile. "Elder Hua, do you have something to say?" Tian was even more puzzled. It seemed that Hua Yiru had discovered something unusual about Cher. Hua Yiru's eyes narrowed slightly as he glanced at Cher. Upon seeing this, Tian immediately understood what he meant. Turning to Shui, he said, "Shui, you and Lilia enter the 9 superbs first." "Okay." Cher looked at Hua Yiru timidly and nodded in agreement. Tian immediately let Cher and Xiaoya enter the 9 extremities before he looked at Hua Yiru. He was very puzzled at the moment and could not understand why Cher would be so afraid of Hua Yiru. Hua Yiru only had the strength of a first-level demi-saint. Forget Cher. He would even be killed by Tian in a single move. With Cher's current strength, she would not even be afraid of a weaker low-level demi-saint. So why would she be afraid of first-level demi-saint? "Wei Kong, Lulan, I have something to say to Tian. Both of you leave for a moment." Hua Yiru looked at Wei Kong and Shur Lulan and said without hesitation. The two nodded and left, waiting in the distance. "Elder Hua, what did you discover? Can you tell me now?" Tian asked solemnly as he looked at Hua Yiru. "Tian, what is your relationship with this Cher?" Hua Yiru did not answer directly and asked instead. "She's my wife." Tian did not hide anything and nodded. Although he did not marry Cher, in his heart, the latter was already his woman, his wife. It really is an extraordinary relationship. Hua Yiru's face darkened, and his expression became very solemn. "Elder Hua, what's going on? Just tell me." Tian looked at Hua Yiru anxiously. "Tian, tell me the truth. What is Cher's true identity?" Hua Yiru's expression was solemn, and he wasn't anxious at all. Cher was born from the emperor of the underworld's heaven-punishing demonic heart. She is the good body among the 3 bodies of demonic heart. Tian knew that it was useless to be anxious, so he said, "Although Cher was born from the devil's heart, she is pure and kind. She is definitely not a bad person." Devil Heart 3 Transformations. The expression in Hua Yiru's eyes darkened as he said, "Tian, you already know that the name of the Underworld Emperor has been engraved on the Holy Soul Monument. If Dean Saint Soul finds out that you have a heaven-punishing, benevolent physique by your side, do you think you will let it live?" Tian frowned, and his face stiffened. Was this what Hua Yiru was worried about? However, this was indeed something Tian hadn't considered. If Kuyo Onaguchi really found out about Cher's true identity, the latter would indeed be in great danger. After a moment of pondering, Tian said with a faint smile, "Rest assured, Elder Hua, I can make sure that Shui stays in the 9 supernaturals. The Ghost Veil sect and Curse World won't be able to find out about her. Cher must never appear again, let alone attack." Hua Yiru nodded heavily and said in a deep voice. The reason why he could see through Cher's identity was because Cher had released her sword intent when she had fought with Shao Qin. Otherwise, even he wouldn't have been able to detect anything out of the ordinary. After Cher had merged with the heavenly Sacred Heart, her aura had been completely concealed. If she didn't actively release her aura, no one except a sage would be able to sense her aura. But now, Empress Xiantian will be a problem. Hua Yiru frowned and said worriedly, Elder Hua, are you saying that Empress Xiantian has also seen through Cher's identity? Nietian's eyes narrowed as he asked. Yes. Hua Yiru smiled bitterly and said, that woman has the blood eyes of a night illusion. The moment Cher attacked, she already knew Cher's identity. Will she tell Dean Saint Soul about this? Nietian's face darkened slightly as he asked. Probably not now, but I don't know if she will in the future. Hua Yiru shook his head and said, based on my understanding of Empress Xiantian, she will definitely use this to threaten you. This? Nietian's face stiffened and he felt very guilty. He was very annoyed that he was too weak. Otherwise, he wouldn't have needed Cher's help. Now that Cher's identity had been exposed, it was equivalent to Empress Xiantian having a handle on him. Given Empress Xuantian's greed, she would definitely demand an exorbitant price from Nietian at the right time. Nietian, you don't have to worry too much about this. I'm guessing that Empress Xiantian won't tell Dean Saint Soul about this unless it's absolutely necessary. Doing so won't benefit her in any way. She won't do something meaningless. Hua Yiru said to Nietian in a low voice. Yes. Nietian nodded. Since things had already come to this, there was no point in worrying about it. However, he had a feeling that Hua Yiru's worries were not limited to this. He guessed that Hua Yiru must have discovered something on Cher's body, but just didn't want to tell him. Nietian, a second sacred world seed has appeared in the sacred soul realm. This is an opportunity for you. Hua Yiru's face darkened slightly as he looked at Nietian. Opportunity? What opportunity? Nietian was stunned for a moment. He didn't know what Hua Yiru meant. Of course, the sacred world seed was a good thing. It had already alarmed the entire sacred soul realm. Even if forces of other domains would make a move upon hearing about it. Hua Yiru said that the sacred world seed was an opportunity for Nietian, which made him very confused. Could it be that Hua Yiru wanted Nietian to obtain the sacred world seed? However, given Nietian's current strength, he probably wasn't even qualified to see the sacred world seed. An opportunity to improve your strength again. Hua Yiru looked at Nietian with a strange glint in his eyes. Oh, Nietian looked at Hua Yiru and couldn't help but laugh. Elder Hua, you want me to take advantage of this opportunity to obtain some sacred chi liquid from the sacred world seed, right? Sacred chi liquid is indeed a good thing. If I can obtain some, it will indeed improve my strength greatly. Sacred chi liquid? Hua Yiru couldn't help but laugh when he heard Nietian's words. Future Star Sky, sacred leader, your vision is too narrow. Nietian was stunned again. His expression changed as he asked in shock, Elder Hua, you're not really going to let me obtain the sacred world seed, are you? What's wrong with that? Hua Yiru smiled faintly as a divine light flashed in his eyes. Nietian was speechless and froze on the spot. Hua Yiru said it so casually as if no one cared about the sacred world seed and that it could be taken at will. At this time, all the major forces of the sacred soul realm had gathered at the Arctic snow mountain. No matter what, it was impossible for a half-saint like Nietian to monopolize the sacred world seed. If it wasn't for the fact that Nietian knew Hua Yiru very well, he would definitely think that the person standing in front of him was a lunatic. Chapter 2941. Going all out, what? Nietian's eyes narrowed when he heard Hua Yiru's words, and his face froze. Hua Yiru had expected such a reaction from Nietian. He smiled faintly and repeated, I said the sacred world seed is what you need to unseal the second star scar dark seal. Well, Nietian's face trembled slightly, and he froze again. He had heard clearly that the sacred world seed was what he needed to unseal the second star scar dark seal. Nietian already knew that every strand of star power was imprisoned by the 9-star scar dark seals. It was precisely because of the layers of imprisonment of the 9-star scar dark seals that the star power could not unleash its true power. Not long ago, Nietian had fused with the heavenly meteorite and unsealed the first star scar dark seal. The reason why his combat power was so terrifying was inextricably linked to the unsealing of the first Star Scar Dark Seal. If Nyetian had not unsealed the first Star Scar Dark Seal, he would have been able to fight a Stage 9 Demi-Saint at best. But the unsealing of the first Star Scar Dark Seal allowed him to fight a Stage 5 Demi-Saint with the strength of a Stage 3 Demi-Saint. After the unsealing of the Star Scar Dark Seal, the star power had improved his strength so much that it had exceeded his expectations. However, Hua Yiru had said that the unsealing of the 9 Star Scar Dark Seals was different, and different things were needed. The first Star Scar Dark Seal needed the Heavenly Meteorite, while the second Star Scar Dark Seal needed the Sacred World Seed. It turned out that the opportunity that Hua Yiru had mentioned was really for Nyetian to take the Sacred World Seed for himself. But that was the Sacred World Seed. Countless eyes were watching it, and there was no telling how many people were willing to sacrifice their lives for the Sacred World Seed. Nyetian was just a Stage 3 Demi-Saint. How could he take the Sacred World Seed for himself? Nyetian, we must not miss this opportunity. Hua Yiru looked at Nyetian with blazing eyes. Compared to Nyetian himself, he was more eager for Nyetian to unseal the Star-Marked Dark Seal as soon as possible. Elder Huan, Nyetian finally reacted and looked a little embarrassed. The reason for that was because their strength was truly too weak. Nyetian, the chances of a realm system giving birth to a Sacred World Seed are very small. In the entire myriad realms, there are only 3 realms that have nurtured a Sacred World Seed. Hua Yiru said gravely, the other Saints' World Seeds are all controlled by powerful organizations of the myriad regions. The Sacred World Seed in front of us has just appeared. This is our best chance. Elder Hua, I understand what you're saying, but what right do we have to fight for a Saints' World Seed? Nyetian smiled bitterly as he looked at Hua Yiru's fervent gaze. As long as you want it, we will definitely have a chance. Hua Yiru looked at him and suddenly smiled. What I want to see now is your determination. All right. Nyetian's eyes darkened and became firm in an instant. He said heavily, Elder Hua, I'm willing to do my best. What he desired the most right now was to increase his strength. He did not want what had happened today to happen again. He was a man. How could he let Cher protect him all the time? He believed that as long as he could unlock the second Star Scar Dark Seal, his strength would usher in a qualitative improvement. Very well. Hua Yiru sensed the determination in Nyetian's eyes. He smiled faintly and said, What I want is your determination. Nyetian nodded slightly, but his expression was somewhat ugly. They were fighting for a Sacred World Seed, so they needed to compete with strength. Determination alone was far from enough. Nyetian, I've already made some arrangements in advance. After a while, Hua Yiru calmed down a lot. He smiled faintly and said, I've informed someone. He's the most important person. I hope he can arrive in time. Nyetian nodded. Since Hua Yiru had said so, he was somewhat prepared. Judging from Hua Yiru's previous arrangements for the meteorite stone, he was definitely extremely good at planning. He hoped that this time, Hua Yiru would not let Nyetian down. But now, your strength urgently needs to increase. Hua Yiru then looked at Nyetian with a deep frown. He admitted that Nyetian's strength had increased at a speed far beyond his expectations after entering the Sacred Soul region. But now that the Sacred World Seed had appeared, Nyetian was only a rank 3 half-sage. This was simply not enough. If Hua Yiru's plan succeeded and Nyetian obtained the opportunity to merge with the Sacred World Seed, then Nyetian would need to at least have the strength of a rank 9 half-sage. Otherwise, he would not be able to withstand the impact of the Sacred World Seed's power. Elder Hua, how much time do I have? Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly as he asked in a deep voice. They could not enter the Arctic Snow Mountain now, so he still had some time. Currently, the various forces of the Sacred Soul region have already discussed. In half a month, all the major forces will unite and form a team to enter the Arctic Snow Mountain. Hua Yiru nodded slightly and said, all the forces wanted to obtain the Sacred World Seed, but it was not that easy to obtain. Before the various forces started fighting each other, The first thing they had to do was to unite and break the protective array of the Sacred World Seed. If they could not even break the protective array of the Sacred World Seed, how could they even talk about obtaining the seed? The Sacred Soul region itself had many forces, and with the addition of forces from other domains, it was very difficult for all parties to complete the discussion. It was already very good that the joint team could set off in half a month. That means I still have half a month's time. Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly as he said in a deep voice. Yes. Hua Ming nodded and said, Nietion, you must advance to rank 9 half-sage within half a month. Rank 9 half-sage. Nietion was stunned when he heard Hua Iru's words. He was currently only a rank 3 half-sage. Was it possible for him to advance 6 levels in half a month? This is the minimum. Hua Iru nodded heavily with a solemn expression. The 9th rank of the half-saint realm was already his lowest expectation. If Nietion could not reach rank 9 half-sage within half a month, it would be impossible for him to fuse with the Sacred World Seed. Nietion, I have 3 drops of Sacred Chi liquid here. Take them. Hua Iru handed over the 3 drops of Sacred Chi liquid while Nietion was still in a daze. Nietion's eyes instantly lit up as he took the 3 drops of Sacred Chi liquid. But in the next moment, his expression turned ugly again. Even 3 drops of Sacred Chi liquid would only allow him to break through to rank 5 half-sage at most. How could he improve his strength to rank 4 half-sage? Nietion, have you forgotten about the blood yuan of the Saint Soul? Just as his face turned ugly, Liolio's voice suddenly rang out. Sacred Spirit Blood Source. Nietion's eyes trembled when he heard Liolio's words, and his lips involuntarily curled up. He had actually forgotten about the Sacred Spirit Blood Source. The Sacred Spirit Blood Source was left behind after he killed a guardian called Gue Guinian in the Sacred Soul Valley's Myriad Bones Cave. He still remembered the surprised look on Liolio's face when he saw the Sacred Spirit Blood Source. After that, the Sacred Spirit Blood Source was handed over to Lulu to refine. Looking at the time, it was almost complete. Chapter 2942. The martial body is too strong. Liolio's sudden mention of the Saint Spirit Blood Yuan boosted Nietion's confidence. The Saint Spirit Blood Yuan came from mysterious Guinian of the Myriad Bones Blood Cave. The power it contained was immeasurable. If there were no accidents, it should be able to help Nietion reach the 9th stage. Hua Iru couldn't help but frown and ask, Nietion, are you confident that you can break through to the 9th grade within 2 weeks? No problem. Nietion nodded with a smile. To be honest, he did not have absolute confidence, but the current situation did not allow him to take a step back. He had to give it his all. All right. Hua Iru nodded with a smile, feeling Nietion's confidence. Elder Hua, there is one more thing that you need someone to do for me. At this moment, Nietion suddenly thought of another urgent matter. Speak. Hua Iru nodded. I have obtained a Manjusaka. I need to send it back to the 9 Regions Alliance as soon as possible. Nietion's eyes narrowed. The Manjusaka is a sacred immemorial flower. It is extremely useful. You should arrange for a divine alchemist to send it. Leave it to me. Hua Iru nodded with a smile. He naturally knew what Nietion was thinking. The latter was worried that the injured in the 9 regions were aging too quickly. Sending a divine alchemist to send the Manjusaka could not only teach Niedao and the rest how to absorb the Manjusaka's energy, but also examine their injuries. Hua Iru was a divine alchemist himself. Sending a divine alchemist to the 9 regions was a piece of cake for him. Elder Hua, thank you. Nietion handed the Manjusaka to Hua Iru. Hua Iru did not waste any time. He immediately brought Nietion to a temporary city outside the Arctic Snow Mountain. This temporary city belonged to the Saint Soul Academy. The entire snowy mountains of the extreme sea had already been surrounded by temporary cities of various sizes. They were like a pack of wolves eyeing the Sacred World Seed. Nietion, you guys stay here for the time being. If there's anything, I'm not far from you. If there's anything, you can come to me at any time. Hua Iru took Nietion to a small courtyard and nodded. Tian agreed and entered the small courtyard with Wei Kong and the others. Since Wei Kong and Shi Lulan had nowhere to go, they decided to stay with Tian. Tian found a room and entered it. Tian, this subordinate of yours is really gutsy. As soon as they entered the room, little fat cat's voice rang out, saying in a deep voice, "You're indeed courageous to take the seed of the sacred realm for yourself." The Ghost Emperor said, "That's right." Tian smiled bitterly. His expression was a little strange. He had to admit that Hua Yiru was really courageous. If he had not mentioned it, Tian would not have dared to have any extravagant hopes for the seed of the sacred realm. One should know that the seed of the sacred realm could completely change a territory and could even create a sacred realm. The entire Saint Soul region and other top forces of the myriad domains were all watching to obtain the seed of the sacred realm. If Hua Yiru's plan succeeded, and Tian successfully merged with the seed of the sacred realm, how would these forces treat Tian? There's no point in thinking too much. Increasing my strength is the most important thing now. Tian smiled. 3 drops of sacred qi liquid appeared in his palm. This was specially prepared by Hua Yiru for him to increase his strength. Tian did not hesitate. He raised his head and swallowed the liquid. He then sat down cross-legged and entered a state of cultivation. The 3 drops of sacred qi liquid contained extremely powerful energy. The moment he swallowed the sacred qi liquid, Tian felt a powerful force appear and impact his martial physique. However, this force did not cause any pressure on his martial physique. Instead, it made him feel very comfortable. Half a day later, Tian completely absorbed the power of the 3 drops of sacred qi liquid and walked out of the room. At this moment, his aura was much stronger than before. However, his expression wasn't very good. It seems that the power of the sacred qi liquid is also very limited, Tian murmured with a deep frown. After absorbing the 3 drops of sacred qi liquid, his strength was currently at the 5th stage half-saint. This increase in strength was within Tian's expectations. Before he had taken the sacred qi liquid, he was at the 3rd stage half-saint. However, there were already signs of him breaking through to the 4th stage half-saint. Even if he did not take the sacred qi liquid, he would still be able to break through very quickly under normal circumstances. The power of the 3 drops of sacred qi liquid was equivalent to increasing Tian's strength by a little more than 1 level. Although this increase was not bad, it was not enough to satisfy Tian. Originally, he had hoped that even if the 3 drops of sacred qi liquid could not help him break through to the 6th stage half-saint, it would at least allow him to reach the peak of the 5th stage half-saint. However, the reality was that he had only reached the 5th stage half-saint. He could not even see the shadow of a 6th stage half-saint. The power of the 3 drops of sacred qi liquid should not be limited to this, Tian said gloomily. Tian, the power of the 3 drops of sacred qi liquid is indeed very strong. If it was an ordinary 3rd stage half-saint, the 3 drops of sacred qi liquid would be enough to upgrade to the 6th stage or even the 7th stage half-saint. At this moment, Fat Cat said, "But your martial physique is very special. It is too powerful. Because of this, you need to absorb more power than other martial physiques of the same level to increase your strength." "I see." Tian could not help but smile bitterly after hearing Fat Cat's explanation. It seemed that there were pros and cons to having a powerful martial physique. Tian, it seems that this emperor has underestimated your martial physique. At this moment, Liolio's voice rang out. The strength of your martial physique has exceeded this emperor's expectations. So even if this emperor allows you to absorb the power of the sacred spirit blood yuan, you might not be able to reach the 9th stage half-saint realm. This, Liolio's words stunned Tian, and his face froze. His martial physique was indeed too powerful, far surpassing other martial physique of the same level. The Supreme Dragon Vein, 900 billion stars, the Fiend God Origin Embryo, the Supreme Demonic Flame, and other heaven-defying items had brought him great power, but at the same time, he needed more power to increase his strength. This is going to be a little troublesome. After a long time, Nyetian frowned with a worried expression. He only had a dozen or so days, and if he was unable to increase his strength to the 9th stage half-saint realm within these dozen or so days, it would be terrible. Lulu, if I were to absorb the power of the sacred spirit blood yuan now, what realm would my strength increase to? Nyetian's eyes narrowed as he asked in a solemn voice. At most, the 8th stage half-saint, replied Lulu. 8th stage, Nyetian muttered with an unsightly expression. He had to break through to the 9th stage half-saint in one go because he still needed some time to stabilize his cultivation after his strength skyrocketed. Lulu, is there any other way? Nyetian asked with a frown. Lulu pondered for a long time before he finally said, There might be a way, but you won't be able to find it in a short time. What is it? Nyetian's eyes burned with excitement. Chapter 2943. An item of both ice and fire. When Nyetian heard the Ulyo's words, he could not help but ask, What do you want such a thing for? To completely activate the power of the sacred spirit blood yuan. Lulu responded in a deep voice. What do you mean? Nyetian was stunned for a moment, not quite understanding what Lulu meant. Although I have refined the power of the sacred spirit blood yuan, I have not completely refined it. Lulu explained, It's like when you absorb the power of the sacred chi liquid. Although you feel that your martial body has completely absorbed the sacred chi liquid, most of the power of the sacred chi liquid is lost in the process of absorption. The absorption of various powers is something that warriors often encounter. But no matter what power, it is impossible to completely absorb it without any loss. Let me give you the simplest example. When a warrior obtains a martial arts inheritance, most of the power of the inheritance is lost in the process of absorption. What the warrior absorbs is only a very small part of the power in the martial arts inheritance. This is why many warriors do not have much improvement in strength after integrating with the power of the inheritance. It is not because the power of the inheritance is too weak, but because the power of the inheritance is lost. After listening to Lulu, Nyetian could not help but frown. He understood what Lulu meant. The power of the sacred spirit blood yuan was very strong, but he could absorb a small part of it and eventually transform it into his own power. In this way, most of the power would be lost. TQR1 the two extremes of ice and fire are the two extreme states of the existence of energy. In this state, the loss of energy is the least. At this time, Lulu continued, If you can find an item of both ice and fire, and then absorb the power of the sacred spirit blood yuan, you can minimize the loss of energy. In this way, you can advance to the stage 9 semi-sage realm. I understand. Nyetian nodded, but his expression became very ugly. He only had a dozen or so days to find an item of both ice and fire extremities. Situ Bai's Ice and Fire Lake was a kind of extreme ice and fire state, but St. Sol Academy was too far from the Arctic snow mountain. A round trip would take more than 10 days, or even dozens of days. Furthermore, Nyetian wasn't sure how useful the ice fire lake would be. Nyetian, why don't you go ask old man Hua? That guy is a god alchemist. I'm sure he knows a lot of things related to ice and fire. At this point, the fat cat's voice rang out, reminding Nyetian. Okay. Nyetian nodded slightly and went to find Hua Iru. A moment later, he arrived at Hua Iru's residence. A 5th rank half-saint? When Hua Iru saw Nyetian, his first reaction was to sense the latter's strength. However, when he sensed Nyetian's strength, his face stiffened and turned ugly. He knew that Nyetian had already taken 3 drops of Saint Chi liquid, but the increase in his strength disappointed him. He originally thought that 3 drops of Saint Chi liquid would be enough for Nyetian to advance to the 6th rank half-saint. Looks like your martial physique is too strong. Hua Iru shook his head and said helplessly. Okay. Nyetian nodded and explained the situation he was facing. Of course, he omitted the existence of Lulu, but he emphasized that he needed an item of both ice and fire extremities. An item of both ice and fire extremities. After listening to Nyetian, Hua Iru frowned slightly and thought for a long time before saying, An item of both ice and fire extremities is very rare. A long time ago, I heard that someone found heavenly ice rheumatism in the Arctic snow mountain. Heavenly ice rheumatism. When Yetian heard this name, his eyes couldn't help but narrow. This name sounded very strange and made people immediately think of the state of both ice and fire extremities. Yes, Hua Iru nodded and said, heavenly ice rheumatism is a kind of natural wonder that contains both ice and fire extremities. It looks like a ball of fire on the outside, but it's actually in a state of ice. I've only heard of this kind of thing, but I've never seen it with my own eyes. If you can find heavenly ice rheumatism, you can solve your current predicament. Nietian's eyes became slightly hot as he said, Elder Hua, you said that heavenly ice rheumatism was once discovered in the Arctic snow mountain, right? Yes. The corners of Hua Iru's mouth twitched. But that was a long time ago. I don't know if there is still heavenly ice rheumatism in the Arctic snow mountain now. Whether there is or not, I have to give it a try. Nietian's eyes were fixed as he said in a low voice. Nietian, do you want to enter the Arctic snow mountain? Hua Iru looked at Nietian and couldn't help but be surprised. Nietian only had less than half a month. It really wasn't suitable for him to enter the Arctic snow mountain at this time. I must enter. Nietian nodded heavily. He looked at Hua Iru and asked, Elder Hua, do you have a way? Hua Iru looked at Nietian, hesitated, and finally nodded. Right now, the Arctic snow mountain had been sealed off by various factions. However, many factions would secretly send some people into the Arctic snow mountain within their own control to first scout out the situation inside the mountain. Hua Iru explained briefly to Nietian and finally said, Nietian, you must be careful when you enter the Arctic snow mountain early. If you encounter people from other factions, they will definitely kill you. I know. Nietian nodded with a smile and said, Elder Hua, don't worry, I will be careful. No matter what faction they were from, they were not allowed to enter the Arctic snow mountain at this time. Therefore, if people from two factions met, it would be a battle to the death. Elder Hua, there is no time to lose. Let me enter the Arctic snow mountain now. Nietian nodded slightly and said in a low voice. Okay. Hua Iru agreed, and then led Nietian to a remote place in the small city. Moments later, the two arrived at the entrance of the Arctic snow mountain. Two black-clothed martial practitioners stood guard at the entrance. Stop! Hua Iru and Nietian had just approached when a black-clothed martial practitioner stepped forward and shouted, gesturing for the two to stop. Student, I am a teacher at the academy, Hua Iru. I will send this student into the Arctic snow mountain. Hua Iru smiled faintly and said calmly, Great Master Hua, I recognize you. The black-clothed martial practitioner smiled darkly and said, But you may not recognize me. Oh, Hua Iru sensed that this person was up to no good. He could not help but frown and asked, Who are you? Let me introduce myself. I am Tian Zhuowei. The black-clothed martial practitioner smiled coldly and stared at Nietian with a pair of cold eyes. Tian Zhuowei. Hearing this name, Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly. He had a bad feeling in his heart. Nietian, does my name remind you of someone? Tian Zhuowei smiled cold and said, Who is Tian Zhuowen to you? Nietian frowned and asked directly. He was not a fool. Of course, he could guess that this Tian Zhuowei in front of him was obviously a member of the Tian family. And judging from the name, Tian Zhuowei and Tian Zhuowen's relationship was not ordinary. Chapter 2944. Tian Zhuowei revealed his identity and did not hide his killing intent when he looked at Nietian. At that moment, he wanted nothing more than to rush up and tear Nietian to shreds. So, you're Tian Zhuowen's second brother. Nietian smiled faintly. He didn't deny it and said, I killed Tian Zhuowen. Tian Zhuowen was the first important person Nietian had killed after entering the Saint Soul Academy. He had thought that the matter was over and did not expect it to be brought up again. Brat, you are so insolent. Tian Zhuowei could see the disdain in Nietian's eyes and could not help but grimace as he said coldly, I will avenge Brother One. What? Are you going to kill me? Nietian laughed and raised his brow in a very provocative manner. Forgive me for being blunt, but your strength is not enough to catch my eye. Tian Zhuowei was not weak and was a rank 4 demi-saint. However, it was a pity that he was no longer strong enough to kill Nie Tian. Is that so? Tian Jue growled, a cold glint surging in his eyes as he said coldly, "A mere rank 5 demi-saint. Aren't you afraid of being treated as an idiot for saying such words?" A rank 5 demi-saint looking down on a rank 4 demi-saint would certainly be treated as an idiot if seen by others. However, Nie Tian's current strength was indeed enough for him to look down on Tian Jue. "Get out of the way, Tian Jue. Nie Tian wants to enter the Arctic snow mountain," Hua Yiru said coldly at that moment. Since Tian Jue had already revealed his identity, he naturally would not be polite anymore. "Get out of the way." Tian Jue smiled coldly and looked at Hua Yiru with contempt. "Do you think that's possible?" "What do you mean?" Hua Yiru's old face turned ugly. It was obvious that Tian Jue did not want Nie Tian to enter the Arctic snow mountain. "Professor Hua, I admit that you have a high position in the academy. However, the Arctic snow mountain has already sealed off the mountain. We are guarding this place and not allowing anyone to enter. This is our duty." Tian Jue responded with a cold smile, his posture arrogant and provocative. Hua Yiru's expression turned even uglier. How could he not tell that Tian Jue was deliberately making things difficult for him? "This entrance is controlled by our Holy Soul Academy. Can't Nie Tian, a student of Godly Soul Academy, enter?" Hua Yiru's face froze, and he growled in a low voice. "Sure." The corner of Tian Jue's mouth twitched as he said, "As long as you have the permission of Dean Gagu or Vice Dean Tian, I will let you in." "You." Hua Yiru's expression froze, and he was rendered speechless. "So you're saying that we can't enter without permission?" Nie Tian took a step forward and asked. "Yes." Tian Jue nodded heavily, extremely arrogant. "What if I insist on entering?" Nie Tianling sneered, his eyes filled with coldness. "What? Do you want to fight us?" Tian Jue looked at Nie Tian and couldn't help sneering. "You want to force your way in? You're just a 5th order half-saint trash." He didn't take Nie Tian seriously at all, and in fact, he hoped that Nie Tian would make a move first. As long as Nie Tian made the first move, he wouldn't have to worry about anything. "Young Master Tian, what if a 5th order half-saint trash like me can defeat you?" Nie Tian wasn't angry, and the corner of his mouth twitched as he asked indifferently. "Humph." Tian Jue smiled Nie Tian cold. "Nie Tian, as long as you can defeat me, I won't stop you, and I'll personally send you into the Arctic snow mountain." "Okay." Nie Tian's eyes flickered. He had been waiting for these words from Tian Jue. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he said with a faint smile, "Come on, let me, a 5th-grade half-saint, have a taste of your strength." Tian Jue's eyes trembled when he saw Nie Tian's move. He didn't expect that Nie Tian really wanted to fight him. A 5th-order half-saint challenging a 4th-order demi-saint? Wasn't that just courting death? "Nie Tian, you're courting death. Don't blame me for it." Tian Jue came to his senses in the next moment, and with a sneer, he took a step forward. His aura surged violently as he fully unleashed his 4th-order demi-saint cultivation, sweeping away the snow and wind around him. "You're much stronger than your useless brother, but unfortunately, in my eyes, you can't even block a single strike of my sword." Nie Tianling smiled coldly, and his eyes flashed with coldness. Between him and Tian Jue, there was indeed someone who was courting death, but it wasn't him, but Tian Jue. Courting death. Tian Jue was completely infuriated. With a roar, he slammed his palm down, causing the void around him to tremble. The terrifying force of the palm condensed into a giant palm in the air, pressing down on Nie Tian. Nie Tian stood where he was without a single ripple in his eyes. Only the corner of his mouth twitched slightly, curling into a cold, disdainful smile. Boom! In the next moment, his body moved, and sword was released from all over his body. An enormous sword force shot up into the sky, making him look like a huge sword that stood between the heavens and the earth. At that moment, Tian Jue felt a faint sense of unease. His eyes narrowed, and he couldn't help but look horrified. He didn't expect Nietion's sword aura to be so powerful. 8 Baron sword slash. In the next moment, Nietion's mouth twitched, and he murmured. Starry heavenly slash was suddenly thrust out, and the sword was condensed in the air. The shadow of the sword howled like a dragon, and it was incomparably violent. Boom! Boom! Then the palm and the sword collided, and the void shook violently. The giant shadow of the palm was forcibly cut apart by the sword shadow. Boom! In the air, the sword shadow suddenly exploded with terrifying power, and it slammed down on Tian Zhuowei. No! Tian Zhuowei's eyes trembled, and he screamed. But unfortunately, it was too late. Bang! A dull thud was heard in the air, and Tian Zhuowei was directly sent flying, drawing a bloody line in the air, and then smashed into a giant ice block beside him. When the other black-clothed cultivator saw this scene, his expression suddenly changed. After he sucked in a breath of cold air, his entire body froze. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would never have believed that a rank 5 demi-saint martial artist could seriously injure a rank 4 demi-saint with a single sword strike. Moreover, looking at Nietion's calm face, it seemed that he hadn't even used his full strength. He really couldn't believe that a rank 5 demi-saint could be so strong. Huairu watched the scene from the side, and his eyes could not help but tremble. He knew that Nietion was strong, far stronger than other martial artists of the same level, but he didn't expect Nietion to be so strong. It could even be called abnormal. How is this possible? Tian Zhuowei crawled up, and his eyes looked at Nietion in horror. He no longer had the arrogance he had before, and it was replaced by shock and fear. At the moment, he was so badly injured that it was difficult for him to even stand. The power of Nietion's sword strike just now was too strong, and it was beyond his imagination. What he didn't know was that Nietion did not use his full strength, or he would have been reduced to ashes. Young Master Tian, I'm going into the mountain. There's no need for you to send me off. Nietion didn't answer Tian Zhuowei, but smiled faintly, and his calm tone was filled with intense mockery. Chapter 29:45. When Tian Zhuowei saw Nietion step into the Arctic ice mountain, his face darkened and he growled. He did say that if Nietion defeated him, he would let Nietion enter the mountain and send him off personally. However, when Nietion really wanted to enter the mountain, he changed his mind. No matter how Tian Zhuowei roared, Nietion didn't pay any attention to him and continued to walk in. The other black-clothed martial artist stood to the side and stared blankly, not daring to stop Nietion. Boom! 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 However, just as Nietion took a few steps, more than a dozen figures in black appeared in the void. Each of them had a fierce look on their face, and they stared at him with murderous eyes. When Nietion saw these people, he could not help but narrow his eyes. He was just wondering why only Tian Zhuowei and Tian Zhuowei were guarding the entrance of the Arctic ice mountain. It turned out that the real experts were hiding in the void. These figures in black were all pseudo-sages. Each of them had a strong and terrifying aura. This is bad. Huairu's face stiffened when he saw this scene from the outside. Teachers, this kid trespassed into the Arctic ice mountain and injured me. Hurry up and kill him. At this moment, Tian Zhuowei shouted and pointed at Nietion. Nietion's face stiffened and it was very ugly. This Tian Zhuowei was obviously using these men in black to kill him. The Arctic ice mountain has been sealed. Please go back. However, these martial artists in black did not listen to Tian Zhuowei. One of them said in a cold and deep voice. TQR, Nietion frowned, but he did not move. Retreat. That black-clothed martial artist roared in a low voice. However, Nietion still stood in the same spot and had no intention of retreating. The Arctic ice mountain doesn't allow anyone to enter. If you don't back off, don't blame us for being impolite. The other black-clothed martial artist's eyes were gloomy and cold, killing intent surged out. What if I don't retreat? Nietion frowned. He lifted his head to look at the black-clothed cultivator and asked coldly, Die! A cold light surged in the eyes of the black-clothed martial artist as he spoke in a cold voice. Boom, boom, boom. Just as he finished speaking, more than 10 black-clothed cultivators moved at the same time. Their auras surged wildly, releasing a terrifying aura. It was obvious that if Nietian did not retreat, they would really attack. Wait. However, at this moment, a deep voice rang out. When the 10-odd black-clad cultivators heard this voice, their expressions changed at the same time. Then, they withdrew their auras. When Nietian heard this voice, he couldn't help but frown in surprise. He was no stranger to this voice. He suddenly turned around and saw a gray-clothed elder standing beside Huairu. "Grandfather!" Tian Jue shouted excitedly when he saw the gray-clothed elder. This gray-clothed elder who suddenly appeared was none other than the deputy dean of the Holy Soul Academy, Tian Jue's grandfather, Tian Yu. Nietian was no stranger to Tian Yu. He had met the latter before. When Huairu saw Tian Yu suddenly appear, his old face became even uglier. He knew that Tian Yu was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Nietian killed his grandson, Tian Zhuowen, and Nietian's father injured him not long ago. Now that he was here, how could he let Nietian enter the Arctic ice mountain? "Brother Hua, what's going on?" Tian Yu's expression was gloomy. It was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. He glanced at Nietian, then looked at Huairu and asked, "Brother Tian, I want Nietian to enter the Arctic ice mountain in advance to find something for me." Huaxian calmed down and said with a faint smile. Unexpectedly, Tian Yu nodded and didn't say much. At this moment, Tian Jue walked over and stared at Nietian viciously. "Grandfather, I didn't let this kid into the mountain, but he barged in and injured me." "Shut up." Tian Yu glared at Tian Jue and reprimanded him. "Grandfather." Tian Jue was stunned and froze on the spot. He did not know what was going on. Why was Tian Yu reprimanding him? "Brother Hua, since it's what you're looking for, of course you can." Then Tian Yu smiled faintly and said to the black-clothed men, "Let him in." The black-clothed martial artists were stunned. After coming to their senses, they retreated. They could not understand why Tian Yu would let Nietian enter the mountain. Nietian injured Tian Jue. "Deputy Dean Tian, thank you very much." Nietian's brows furrowed, also somewhat unable to figure it out. But he still smiled faintly and gave his thanks. Then he strode into the Arctic ice mountain, his figure disappearing very quickly. Huairu's brows furrowed. Looking at Nietian's disappearing back view, there was a faint, uneasy premonition in his heart. He already understood at this time why Tian Yu wanted to let Nietian enter the mountain. Tian Yu wanted to borrow the hands of other forces to eliminate Nietian. Although Nietian had injured Tian Jue, it was not a big deal. No matter how Tian Yu pursued it, it was also impossible to kill Nietian. But letting Nietian enter the Arctic ice mountain was different. As long as Nietian encountered people from other forces, he would be in great danger. After all, Nietian only had the strength of a Tier 5 half-sage. Any powerhouse that appeared could kill him very easily. "Brother Hua, people from other forces will definitely send people into the ice mountain to investigate. If Nietian encounters these, he will likely be in danger." Tian Yu looked at the place where Nietian's figure disappeared and said with a faint smile. He saying this was clearly reminding Huairu that the latter made a wrong decision. Nietian entered the Arctic ice mountain in advance and was destined to never return. Huairu's gaze sharpened slightly. He glanced at Tian Yu and did not say anything. At the same time, in the Arctic ice mountain, Nietian's figure sprinted wildly, like a snow fox in the snow-filled land, his speed very fast. After a while, he came outside an ice mountain valley before slowing down. "Nietian, we are now searching in the periphery of the snow mountain. That sacred world seed must be in the hinterland of the snow mountain. We must not approach there now." At this time, Fat Cat's voice sounded, reminding Nietian. After the sacred world seed was formed, it would be accompanied by a powerful protective array. That was a place full of danger. Nietian must not approach it. Nietian agreed. His purpose of entering the Arctic ice mountain in advance was to search for items of ice and fire, not for the sacred world seed. Next, Niet Tion began searching in the periphery of the snow mountain. But the Arctic ice mountain was too big. Want to find something was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Soon, 5 days passed. Niet Tion found nothing. He did not even encounter people from other forces. It's not a solution to keep searching like this. It seems that we still have to enter the hinterland of the extreme cold. Niet Tion frowned and said in a deep voice. He felt that the chances of finding items of ice and fire in the hinterland of the Arctic ice mountain would be higher. As he spoke, he prepared to set off for the interior of the ice mountain. Roar! However, at this time, a vigorous, angry roar came from afar. It was extremely violent. Niet Tion's gaze sharpened slightly. Then, he almost sensed something. His expression suddenly changed as he turned to look at the sky behind him. In the sky, a colossal beast that was thousands of meters tall stood there like a mountain. It stood upright, and its aura was as vast as the sea. This colossal beast was snow-white and looked like a giant lion. In the center of its forehead was actually a fiery red, faintly surging with a blazing aura. Chapter 2946. Niet Tion narrowed his eyes as he stared at the scene in the sky. He did not expect the person fighting against the gigantic beast to be a woman. Although he was very far away from the woman and could only see her silhouette, he could tell that she was a beautiful woman. He was curious as to why the woman would appear here alone. Icy Flame Snow Chilin. Just as Niet Tion was feeling bewildered, the fat little cat's voice echoed out. I can't believe this kind of ancient beast would appear in a realm. It's indeed an icy flame, Snow Chilin. Judging from its size, it should be a cub, Ghost Emperor said. Upon hearing the Ghost Emperor's words, Niet Tion's eyes widened and his face stiffened. Cubs! The gigantic white beast was more than 1,000 meters long. It was a cub. It was hard to imagine how big an adult icy flame, Snow Chilin would be. Roar! At that moment, the icy flame, Snow Chilin roared furiously. Its gigantic body was like a snowy mountain as it unleashed a powerful energy wave that spread across the sky. So strong, Niet Tion's eyes narrowed when he sensed the energy fluctuations, and he was shocked. He did not expect the icy flame, Snow Chilin, to be so powerful. He estimated that the icy flame, Snow Chilin's combat strength was comparable to a pseudo-Sacred Realm expert. Most importantly, the icy flame Snow Chilin was only a cub. Oomph! The woman in blue chuckled when she saw the icy flame, Snow Chilin's roar. Her eyes were filled with coldness as she raised her hand. A small vortex appeared on her palm. In the next moment, she suddenly thrust out her palm, and the vortex whistled out. It suddenly expanded in the air, turning into a hurricane that was almost 10,000 meters wide. It was like a giant devouring beast, and it pressed down on the ice flame, Snow Chilin. Boom, boom, boom. Heaven and earth roared as the strong force of the tornado was released. The wind and snow in the sky turned into sharp blades. Roar! The icy flame, Snow Chilin's body, shook a little before it let out a deafening roar. Roar! In the next instant, its body actually shone brightly, and crimson flames instantly enveloped its body. Streaks of flames collided in the air, like the raging tongues of fire above a volcano. Suddenly, the surrounding space became hot, and the area within tens of thousands of meters became a furnace. Niet Tion's face sank when he saw this. He was shocked. He had clearly sensed an icy aura from the ice flame, Snow Unicorn. However, the energy that the ice flame Snow Unicorn was releasing now was actually the power of fire. This was simply too strange. Could it be that the ice flame, Snow, Kirin's body contained the power of both ice and fire? Roar! At this moment, the Snow Chilin let out another angry roar. Its huge body moved, and its four hooves stomped on the ground as it charged forward. Rumble! In the next instant, the giant white beast's body forcefully tunneled into the hurricane. This! Niet Tion's eyes narrowed in astonishment. The destructive power of the hurricane was so strong that it could instantly destroy a mountain range that was hundreds of thousands of meters tall. However, the ice flame snow Kirin had actually charged into it. Its body was so strong that it could be said to be abnormal. White-haired beast, you're courting death. The lady in blue's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. She slapped her palm again, and another hurricane appeared, enveloping the snow Kirin. Take your 1 inch, oh no. Nietion's heart sank as he looked at the hurricane. He felt that the ice flame snow Kirin would definitely be crushed by the impact of the two hurricanes. Nietion, you've underestimated the ice flame snow Kirin. This is a primordial beast. Its body is so strong that it's even more terrifying than the golden giant dragon. Fat Cat chuckled as she guessed Nietion's worries. Nietion's expression changed slightly. He frowned and murmured, "Could it be that the hurricane can't kill the ice flame snow Kirin?" Roar! Before he could finish a sentence, the ice flame snow Kirin let out a violent roar. Then, crimson flames gushed out from its gigantic body, forming huge pillars of fire that attacked the hurricane crazily. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, a terrifying roar resounded in the sky. Waves of powerful aura surged in the air. Bang! Just then, the ice flame snow Qilin moved and walked out of the hurricane. Behind it, the hurricane spiraled in the air. Finally, it couldn't take it anymore and exploded. Nietion's expression flickered with astonishment. So powerful. The ice flame snow Kirin's body was really abnormal. It had destroyed the violent hurricane just like that. Then, the crimson flames on the ice flame snow Kirin's body became even more violent. It waved its two gigantic front claws, and balls of flames shot out like sharp arrows towards the other hurricane. Boom! 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 The violent roar continued. Under the countless attacks of the flames, the hurricane finally could not withstand it and was slowly torn apart. The lady in blue retreated abruptly and steadied herself. Her delicate face revealed a trace of surprise. Obviously, she did not expect the ice flame snow Kirin to be so powerful. The strength of a white-furred beast like you has exceeded my expectations. Although the lady in blue was surprised, she did not panic. Instead, she laughed, and her eyes were filled with excitement. Roar! At that moment, the ice flame snow Kirin let out a low roar. The crimson flames on its body became even more intense. Then, like a huge snowball on fire, it rushed towards the lady in blue. Watch out! Nietion's eyes suddenly trembled when he saw this scene, and he couldn't help but cry out in alarm. Boom! The ice flame snow Kirin's body was extremely powerful. Like a huge volcano, it rushed towards the lady in blue. Even a high-level pseudo-sage expert would not dare to take such a violent attack head-on. Good timing. I want to see how strong your beast body is. The lady in blue bellowed. Then, a long sword appeared in her hand. She stabbed the sword forward, and the shadow of the sword flew across the sky towards the ice flame snow Kirin. Bang! In the next instant, the gigantic sword descended, directly slashing the ice flame snow Qilin's body. A thunderous boom rang out in the air, followed by a huge shockwave that spread out in all directions, as if wanting to destroy everything in its path. As a result, Nietion was struck by a sense of oppression. He guessed that the lady in blue was very powerful. She was at least a 5th-rank pseudo-sage. In the next moment, the ice flame snow Kirin retreated 1,000 meters, and the shadow of the sword collapsed. The ice flame snow Kirin was unharmed after taking a direct hit from the lady in blue. However, the lady in blue was able to block the ice flame snow Kirin's attack with just one sword. Her strength was not ordinary. The ice flame snow Kirin and the lady in blue were evenly matched. You white-furred beast, your strength is much stronger than I expected. It seems like I have to use the 1,000 silkwind blade to kill you. The lady in blue steadied herself and said in a low voice. Chapter 29:47. The lady in blue stood high up in the sky. Her blue robe fluttered in the wind and snow, giving off a feeling of isolation. At this moment, She slowly raised the long sword in her hand and spun it in the air. Then, gusts of wind energy appeared like silk and rain. Tian stared at the lady in blue, and his expression froze. He had never seen such a strange technique, using the power of wind to condense silk like rain. This lady has some tricks up her sleeves. If this ice flame snow unicorn can't use the power of ice and fire at the same time, I'm afraid it'll be in danger, Fat Cat said. This ice flame snow unicorn is still young. It's already good enough that it can use the power of fire. I don't think it can even use ice and snow, let alone the power of ice and fire, Ghost Emperor said coldly. So you're saying that the ice flame snow unicorn is going to be killed soon? Tian frowned when he heard the conversation between Soul and Cat. Little Fat Cat and the Ghost Emperor fell silent at the same time, not saying anything more. Tian couldn't help but look at the blue-clothed woman and thought, "Are you really that powerful?" Roar. At this moment, the ice flame snow unicorn roared angrily and charged forward. The flames around its body were extremely violent. Tongues of fire rolled in the air as if they were going to burn everything. TQR 1-inch good timing. The lady in blue stood high up in the sky. Her lips twitched, and she said cold, "I'll let you have a taste of the power of the 1,000 silk wind blades." As soon as she finished speaking, the lady in blue stabbed forward with her long sword. What appeared in the air was not a huge sword shadow, but a huge net of wind blades. The giant net was extremely large, and it was still expanding in midair as if it was going to envelop everything. What a strange technique. Tian's eyebrows furrowed in astonishment. The lady in blue's 1,000 silk wind blades were indeed terrifying. It seemed to be a combination of sword intent and some kind of bloodline power to form wind blades that then condensed into a net. In the next moment, the ice flame Snow Cheelant's body collided directly with the 1,000 silk wind blades. The huge net of wind blades suddenly tightened, and the space around it was suddenly pulled taut, letting out a muffled groan. The ice flame snow unicorn was instantly enveloped by the 1,000 wind blade threads. The wind blade threads slowly tightened and trapped the ice flame snow unicorn. Roar! The ice flame Snow Cheelan let out a thunderous roar as it was trapped in the net, causing the entire sky to tremble. Immediately after, its gigantic body began to attack in a frenzy. Waves of energy wreaked havoc in the space. However, the more it struggled, the tighter the 1,000 silk wind blades became. The lady in blue looked at the struggling ice flame snow unicorn and smiled cold. "Little bastard, do you think you can escape this time? In order to capture you, I even used the 1,000 silk wind blade. However, for the ice flame snow crystal, even if I have to pay 1,000 wind blades, I won't hesitate." Ice flame snow crystal? What's that? Tian couldn't help but frown when he heard the lady in blue's words. It sounded like the ice flame snow crystal belonged to the ice flame snow unicorn. This woman wants the ice flame snow crystal. At this moment, the Fat Cat exclaimed with a panicked expression, "Fat, what is the ice flame snow crystal?" Tian's eyes narrowed as he asked. The ice flame snow crystal is the ice flame snow unicorn's beast core. The Fat Cat said in a deep voice, "This ice flame snow unicorn is only a cub. If the ice flame snow crystal is extracted from its body, it will die for sure. This is probably the last primordial beast. It will be a pity if it dies just like that." "Fat, should I save it?" Tian's eyes flickered when he heard the Fat Cat's words. "Save it?" The Fat Cat asked in return. "That lady in blue is an 8th-rank pseudo-saint. Even the ice flame snow unicorn was captured by her. Are you a match for her?" Tian's face darkened, unable to say anything. So this lady in blue was an 8th-rank pseudo-saint. No wonder she was so strong. Roar! At this moment, the ice flame snow unicorn was still roaring, but its voice was getting more and more miserable. As the ice flame snow unicorn struggled, the 1,000 wind blades tightened. The extremely tough wind blades actually penetrated the ice flame snow unicorn's body. Bloody wounds appeared on the ice flame snow unicorn's body. blood gushed out continuously and instantly dyed its body red. Nyetian couldn't help but be moved when he saw this. This scene was just too tragic. However, the blue-clothed woman's lips curled into a cold smile as she watched from the side. It was obvious that she was waiting for the ice flame snow unicorn to die under the 1,000 wind blades. This woman is so cruel. The fat cat frowned. She could have killed the ice flame snow unicorn quickly, but she chose not to. Instead, she waited for it to slowly die. Nyetian's eyes narrowed as he couldn't help but say, "Vicious indeed." The lady in blue was indeed cruel. The ice flame snow unicorn was already powerless to resist, but she refused to give it a quick death. After a while, the ice flame snow unicorn slowly stopped struggling. Its huge body was already a bloody mess. Even its bones could be seen. It was a tragic sight. "Little fellow, have you had enough? Then I won't hold back." The lady in blue smiled and walked forward when she sensed the ice flame snow unicorn's aura. She wanted the ice flame snow crystal of the snow unicorn. Roar! However, at this moment, the ice flame snow unicorn suddenly let out a low roar. It raised its huge claws and slapped at the lady in blue. The lady in blue was shocked. Her exquisite face froze. Bang! In the next moment, she was sent flying by the ice flame snow unicorn's huge paw before she could react. Her body drew a bloody trail in the air. The sudden turn of events caused Nyetian's eyes to widen and his expression to flicker. He didn't expect the dying ice flame snow unicorn to suddenly explode with such terrifying power. This ice flame snow unicorn is very intelligent. It actually tore open a gap in the 1,000 silk wind blade and pretended to be in a state of near death. Then it waited for the woman in blue to get close to it before delivering the fatal blow. Little Fat Cat exclaimed in surprise and excitement. The ice flame snow unicorn's performance was indeed beyond his expectations. "You white-furred animal, you tricked me." The lady in blue roared as she steadied herself. Her body was covered in blood. She was obviously severely injured. The slap just now was completely out of her expectations. She was caught off guard. Fortunately, the ice flame snow unicorn was also severely injured. Otherwise, it would have killed the lady in blue with one slap. "Ark!" The ice flame snow unicorn growled. Its aura became even weaker. It had used up the last of its strength in that slap. Now, it could only wait for death. Chapter 2948. Swoosh! A sharp sword shadow appeared in the sky and accurately pierced towards the snow cheelin's forehead. If the sword landed, the snow cheelin would die for sure. Boom! At the moment of life and death, a sword shadow appeared in the void and came crashing down, blocking the fatal sword. The sudden turn of events caused the lady in blue to frown. Her expression was very ugly. Her pair of cold eyes stared at the silver-haired man not far away. At this time, it was Nyetian who had saved the snow cheelin with his sword. However, when she saw Nyetian's face clearly, her expression became somewhat strange. "Take your 1 inch, who are you?" The blue-robed woman's eyes darkened as she asked coldly. Instead of answering the blue-robed woman's question, Nyetian smiled and said in a clear voice, "I saved this ice flame snow cheelin." The lady in blue frowned when she heard Nyetian's words and said coldly, "Brat, you think too highly of yourself. Do you think you can rob me with your strength of a 5th-grade half-sage?" Apparently, the blue-robed woman believed that Nyetian had shown up at this moment because he wanted to take the ice flame snow cheelin's ice flame crystal from her. "I admit that you are strong, but the snow cheelin's palm has injured your yuan meridian, right?" Nyetian smiled faintly and said, "You might be able to kill me if you forcefully used your strength, but your martial physique will be more seriously injured. What's more troublesome is that it might threaten your martial Tao foundation. Can you afford to pay such a heavy price?" Nyetian's smile became even more provocative as he looked at the lady in blue proudly. The lady in blue didn't speak immediately, but her expression clearly stiffened. She didn't expect Nyetian to be able to tell that she was seriously injured. Nyetian was obviously threatening her. but it was also the truth. If the blue-clothed woman insisted on killing Nietian, her martial body would definitely be severely injured. She wanted the ice flame snow crystal because she wanted to use its power to break through to the rank 9 pseudo-sage. However, if she forcefully made a move when her Yuan meridian was injured, it would be extremely harmful to her martial body. If that was the case, even if she killed Nietian and obtained the ice flame snow crystal, it might not be able to make up for the injuries to her martial body. Do you want to do something that's not worth it? Nietian saw that the woman in blue was hesitating, so he said with a faint smile, Nietian, Dugu was right. You really are a difficult character to deal with. The woman in blue looked at Nietian and cold said. She had actually called out Nietian's name. Nietian looked at the woman in blue, and his expression changed. It was strange that she knew him, but in the next moment, he thought of someone. Dark Knight's Dugu Kan. He guessed that the Dugu the woman in blue spoke of was Dugu Kan. Looks like you're from Dark Knight. Nietian's gaze focused as he smiled. Because he had ruined Dugu Kan's plans and caused the deaths of over a dozen world spiritists in Dark Knight, Dark Knight had already placed him on the Dark Knight Sky Slaughter list. Previously, at the Sea of Suffering Edge, Nietian had already encountered an assassin from Dark Knight, and that person had recognized him. This blue-clothed woman had recognized him, and even called him Dugu. Without a doubt, she was from Dark Knight. Nietian, you're indeed smart. The blue-clothed woman smiled cold. I'm Lan Jiawu, one of the 4 great elders of Dark Knight. Such a high status. Nietian's gaze focused as he smiled. No wonder you have the strength of a rank 8 pseudo-sage. This Lan Jiawu didn't look very old, but she had such a high status in Dark Knight. She was the same as Dugu Kan, one of the 4 great elders. Nietian, I can make a deal with you, he said. Lan Jiawu's beautiful eyes flickered as she said, as long as you let me take the ice flame snow crystal today, you and Dark Knight will no longer owe each other anything. You will no longer be on the Dark Knight slaughter list, and Dark Knight's assassins will no longer cause trouble for you. How about it? Nietian raised his brows. He didn't expect Lan Jiawu to say such a thing. At a time like this, as long as he left or watched with folded arms, the people of Dark Knight would no longer chase after him. That sort of deal sounded pretty good. At least, Nietian wouldn't lose anything. But with that, the young ice flame, Snow Chilin, would definitely die. Nietian, I know that you're soft-hearted and don't want to see an ice flame, Snow Chilin die, just like that. Seeing that Nietian wasn't speaking, Lan Jiawu laughed and said, but this ice flame, Snow Chilin, is heavily injured, and too much of my 1,000-edged sword intent has seeped into its body, so you won't be able to save it. Soon, the ice flame, Snow Chilin's internal organs, limbs, and meridians will be completely shattered by the 1,000-edged sword intent. Are you willing to offend Dark Knight for a dead ice flame, Snow Chilin? HM? Hearing Lan Jiawu's words, Nietian's expression darkened, and he sent his divine sense towards the ice flame, Snow Chilin. His expression froze, and he was greatly shocked. Lan Jiawu was correct. There was too much 1,000-edged sword intent within the ice flame, Snow Chilin's body. Nietian could feel the berserk 1,000-edged sword intent rampaging within the ice flame, Snow Chilin's body, slowly tearing apart everything within. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before the ice flame, Snow Chilin, became a corpse. Nietian, this elder's suggestion will not harm you in any way. Are you not willing to agree? Lan Jiawu's expression darkened as she spoke again. Mph. Suddenly, Nietianling laughed twice, his expression extremely strange. Nietian, what are you laughing at? Seeing Nietian laugh strangely, Lan Jiawu couldn't help but frown as she asked. I'm laughing at your ignorance. Nietianling laughed coldly and said, Elder Lan, do you really think I'm a 3-year-old child? Do you think I'll believe your words? Furthermore, even if you keep your word, why would I make this deal with you? I'm certain that you won't dare to attack, so I'll make a deal with you. The ice flame, Snow Crystal, will be mine. Lan Jiawu's beautiful eyes suddenly shook, and her beautiful face evidently froze. She didn't think that Nietian would be so astute and see things so clearly. She indeed didn't plan on keeping her promise. How could an assassin like her, who had killed countless people, care about promises? So you're saying that you're going to fight this elder? Lan Jiawu laughed coldly and said, then let this elder see just what kind of ability a rank 5 half-saint like you has. After speaking, she took a step forward, and the aura around her body surged out. She was like a raging wolf that rolled through the air. When Yetian saw this, he laughed mockingly and said, Elder Lan is indeed ruthless. Even if you're going to injure yourself, you still want to kill a rank 5 half-saint like me. Stinking brat, you're courting death. Lan Jiawu roared in a low voice, then raised her arm and slammed out with her palm. The space suddenly tightened, and an extremely sharp blade of wind shot through the air towards Nyetian. Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he was quite shocked. Chapter 2949. High up in the sky, Lan Jiawu instantly attacked, and a blade of wind tore through the air towards Nyetian. Nyetian's gaze focused, and he instantly felt a bone-chilling coldness. He never thought that Lan Jiawu would be able to explode with such terrifying power, even though her Yuan meridians were injured. Stinking brat, you're too arrogant. Even if this elder is injured, killing a 5th-stage half-saint like you is as easy as flipping my hand. Lan Jiawu laughed coldly, and her eyes were extremely sinister. Is that so? Nyetian's gaze focused, and with a low roar, his entire body surged with sword intent. He stabbed out with the starry heavenly slash, and the powerful sword image was like a dragon coming out of the abyss. Bang! In the next instant, the sword image and the blade of wind collided, and a muffled sound rang out in the air. Following this, the giant sword image paused in the air, and in the next instant, it shattered. Nyetian's gaze darkened, and his expression changed. Before he could even react, his shoulder was pierced by the blade of wind, and blood gushed out. He took a few steps back before stabilizing his body, and with a shake of his body, he forced out the 1,000-blade sword intent that had seeped into his body. His face was slightly pale, but his eyes were still as sharp as ever. Lan Jiawu was indeed an 8th-stage pseudo-saint powerhouse. She still had such strength, even though her Yuan meridians were heavily injured. He's not dead. Lan Jiawu looked at Nyetian, and her expression suddenly changed, and a trace of blood flowed out of the corner of her mouth. That blade of wind just now did not seem like anything special, but it contained a powerful sword intent, and even a high-level demi-saint powerhouse would be blasted into pieces by that blade of wind. However, even though Nyetian only had the strength of a 5th-stage half-saint, his martial body was still fine after being struck by that blade of wind, and he was even able to force out the 1,000-blade sword intent. This was something that Lan Jiawu had never imagined. It had to be said that she had underestimated Nyetian's strength. Elder Lan, you are indeed very powerful, but do you still want to kill me in your current state? Nyetian looked at Lan Jiawu and said with a cold smile. He could already sense that Lan Jiawu's Yuan meridians were even more injured, and if the latter continued to forcefully attack, it would be very dangerous. Little brat, don't you know? A skinny camel is still better than a horse. Lan Jiawu screamed, but before she could finish speaking, she spat out a mouthful of blood. Upon seeing this, Nyetian let out a cold laugh and said, Elder Lan, it seems that a camel like you isn't as big as a horse. If you continue to attack your Yuan meridians will probably shatter. Jia Tianlan's eyes became slightly, and, in her expression, Jia Tian's in yi, Jia Jiawu was in, Tian in, Jiawu Tian in. Even if she died, she would have died. If she would become a, and would die. If she would Tian in, and would become a. Furthermore, she sensed that there was a strange power inside of Nyetian. Even if she made another move, she might not be able to kill Nyetian. Leave. Lan Jiawu's expression was incredibly dark, but she still chose to leave. It was not worth risking her life for an ice flame snow crystal. Nyetian, we'll wait and see. Lan Diaowu raised her head and looked at Nietian as she spoke coldly. Following this, her figure flashed as she left. Take your 1-inch elder Lan. Take care. I won't be sending you off. Nietian looked at Lan Diaowu's back as he calmly smiled. He would not chase after Lan Diaowu. After all, she was an 8-stage pseudo-saint expert. If she was forced into a corner, who knew what she would do? After Lan Diaowu left, Nietian immediately turned his attention to the ice flame snow unicorn. Oh no, this big guy probably won't survive. Nietian frowned as he sensed the ice flame snow Qilin's body. The ice flame snow Qilin had been injured by the 1,000 silk wind blades, and too much of the 1,000-edged sword intent had seeped into its body. Although its body was still intact, its meridians had been torn apart. Whoa! At this moment, the ice flame snow Qilin suddenly let out a low roar, and tears began to flow out of the corners of its eyes. HM? Nietian frowned as he muttered. Is this big guy trying to tell me something? Nietian, look at the ice flame snow Qilin's body. Just as Nietian was feeling confused, Fat Cat's voice suddenly sounded out as it cried out in surprise. Nietian's gaze trembled as he looked at the ice flame snow Qilin's body. He discovered that there was a faint layer of icy blue energy circulating around the ice flame snow Qilin's body. What's going on? Nietian was stunned, and he couldn't help but frown. He could sense an extremely strong aura of ice from the icy blue energy. But wasn't the ice flame snow Qilin releasing its fire aura just now? Nietian, the ice energy within the ice flame snow Qilin's body, is about to awaken. Fat Cat exclaimed in joy. Nietian was slightly taken aback, and he didn't understand. The ice flame snow Qilin is a primordial beast, and its body contains both the power of ice and fire. It's an extremely rare ice and fire beast. Fat Cat's eyes darkened as it said, the ice flame snow Qilin's growth usually awakens either the power of ice or the power of fire before awakening the other power. When the ice flame snow Qilin grows to a certain extent, it can use both powers at the same time. If this ice flame snow Qilin can use the power of ice and fire at the same time, then the woman in blue won't be its match. So that's how it is. Nietian's eyes flickered as he understood. However, his face darkened in the next moment, and he said, so what if the ice flame snow Qilin awakens the power of ice? It's going to die anyway. That's not necessarily true. Fat Cat chuckled and said, when the ice flame snow Qilin awakens its power, its life force will skyrocket. If it can absorb the power of the same element at this time, then it won't die. Power of the same element? Nietian was stunned at first, and then he said in shock, is it heavenly ice rheumatism? The ice flame snow Qilin was an ice and fire beast. The power of the same element as it, of course, was heavenly ice rheumatism. That's right. Fat Cat nodded heavily. This, Nietian's face darkened, and he said, the ice flame snow Qilin doesn't have much time left. When am I going to find heavenly ice rheumatism? You don't need to look for it. Fat Cat chuckled, and it was actually very proud. What do you mean? Nietian's eyes narrowed, and he looked puzzled. The ice flame, snow Qilin, and heavenly ice rheumatism have the same element. So wherever there is an ice flame, snow Qilin, heavenly ice rheumatism will also be nearby. Fat Cat said with a smile. You mean that the ice flame, snow Qilin knows where heavenly ice rheumatism can be found? Nietian's eyes trembled, and it became very passionate. That's right. Fat Cat nodded, and it was very excited. Nietian was very surprised, and then he looked at the ice flame, snow Qilin, and stared at its huge eyes. He immediately realized that the ice flame, snow Qilin, was currently looking at a place on the ice mountain below. Nietian followed the ice flame, snow Qilin's line of sight, and saw a long and narrow valley. Heavenly ice rheumatism is in that valley? Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he murmured. Chapter 2950. Nietian stared at the valley, his eyes blazing with passion. Nietian, let's go take a look at the valley. Fat Cat's voice rang out. Okay, Nietian replied, and a pair of astral wings appeared on his back. astral energy gushed out from his body, and when his wings were fully extended, they spanned a few thousand meters. Oh, he flapped his wings, and the gigantic ice flame, Snow Kirin, was swept up into the air. Moments later, Nyetian brought the ice flame, Snow Kirin, into the valley. Woo! He carefully placed the ice flame, Snow Kirin, on the surface of the ice. The Snow Kirin let out a low roar of gratitude, and tears welled up in its eyes. This fellow is quite emotional. Nyetian glanced at the ice flame, Snow Kirin, and laughed lightly. After which, he didn't waste any more time, and immediately walked towards the valley. The ice flame, Snow Kirin, didn't have much time left, and he had to find the heavenly ice rheumatism as soon as possible. Very quickly, he arrived at the depths of the valley and saw a gigantic cave in the distance, which was covered in ice and snow. The cave was extremely wide, and the entrance was 1,000 meters wide. It was like a gigantic beast had opened its mouth. Nyetian's silhouette flickered, and he directly entered the cave. It was extremely cold inside the cave, and there were huge icicles hanging from the walls and ceiling. The smaller ones were tens of meters long, and the bigger ones were hundreds of meters long. Nyetian walked into the cave, and he could feel the coldness in the air getting colder and colder. Very quickly, he arrived at the end of the cave, and in front of him was a gigantic ice lake with a circumference of 10,000 meters. Could it be that the heavenly ice rheumatism is in this ice lake? Nyetian looked around and didn't discover anything. Finally, he fixed his gaze on the ice lake. Nyetian, go down and take a look. Fat Cat was even more anxious than Nyetian and urged. Okay, Nyetian replied and drew in a deep breath. The ice lake was emitting cold air, and one could imagine how cold the surface of the lake was. Pooh! Nyetian didn't hesitate and directly stepped into the ice lake. In the blink of an eye, a bone-chilling coldness assaulted his entire body, causing him to shiver uncontrollably. Without any delay, he spread out his divine sense and carefully sensed his surroundings. A moment later, he sensed his surroundings within a radius of several thousand meters. Finding nothing, he could only head towards the depths of the lake. The deeper he swam to the bottom of the lake, the colder Nyetian felt. That kind of cold power was too terrifying. Perhaps a martial artist below the half-step sage realm would be directly frozen into ice slag. The frozen lake was very deep, and yet Tian swam for several minutes before he finally reached the bottom. After he landed, he immediately sensed an unusual aura, causing his expression to freeze. It's in front. Fat Cat also sensed the same aura and shouted in surprise. Yet Tian's eyes flickered as he looked ahead. His figure flickered as he walked over. He quickly arrived at a canyon at the bottom of a lake. As soon as he stepped inside, the scene that greeted his eyes left him completely dumbfounded. The entire canyon at the bottom of the lake was filled with light blue light, sparkling like fire, transparent and clear. On the ground, there was a layer of light blue light balls. From afar, it looked like a layer of blue carpet. One light blue light ball after another covered the entire canyon. Each light ball was not big, about the size of fist. However, if one were to carefully sense it, they seemed to contain a very terrifying power. Heavenly ice rheumatism. At this moment, Fat Cat let out a strange cry and shouted in surprise. This is heavenly ice rheumatism. Nyetian was stunned, and his face was blank. He didn't expect that these ice blue light balls were the heavenly ice rheumatism that he had been searching for so long. Yes, Fat Cat replied firmly, very sure of it. Nyetian took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. He took a step forward, stretched out his palm, and held an ice blue light ball. At this moment, the ice blue light ball actually spread out on his palm layer by layer like flower petals. At the center of the ball, there was a flower that looked like a flame in a frozen state. So this is heavenly ice rheumatism. Nyetian looked at the heavenly ice rheumatism on his palm. After a long time, he finally calmed down and exclaimed. The petals of the heavenly ice rheumatism on his palm fell one by one, like flowing flames, while the flower in the center in the form of flame was like ice. No wonder this strange flower was called heavenly ice rheumatism. Nyetian, that ice flame snow unicorn can't hold on any longer. Hurry up and bring some heavenly ice rheumatism back. At this moment, Fat Cat reminded Nyetian. Okay, Nyetian agreed. He didn't stand on ceremony and immediately took thousands of heavenly ice rheumatism. He took almost half of the heavenly ice rheumatism in the entire valley. He didn't take everything because he guessed that this valley, including the ice lake, was the ice flame snow unicorn's territory. After taking the heavenly ice rheumatism, Nyetian didn't waste any time and immediately left the ice lake. He quickly left the cave and came to the valley. Roar! However, at this moment, a deep roar rang in his ears. Nyetian's gaze froze, and his expression changed. This was the roar of the ice flame snow unicorn. He sprinted towards where the ice flame snow unicorn was. He was still in midair when he heard several voices. 19th young master, we're so lucky. We actually encountered a legendary primordial beast, the ice flame snow unicorn. Rumor has it that there are primordial beasts in the Arctic snow mountain. I didn't expect it to be true. Yeah, this ice flame snow unicorn is so big. It's probably very old. I wonder who injured the ice flame snow unicorn so badly. Who cares who it is? Anyway, this ice flame snow unicorn is about to die. Let's do a good deed and let it die a little more quickly. However, its ice flame snow crystals will belong to this young master. Hearing these voices, Nyetian's face instantly darkened, and at the same time, he looked a little unsightly. Among these voices, there was one that he wasn't unfamiliar with. It was the Mu family's 19th young master, Murongjio, whom he met previously. At that time, Murongjio used despicable means to injure Wei Kong, but he was injured by Cher's sword. Nyetian didn't think that he would actually encounter Murongjio here. He clearly remembered that Murongjio's strength was a level 7 half-sage. Moreover, he was an ice attribute cultivator. Right now, he was only a level 5 half-sage. It was almost impossible for him to fight against Murongjio. Murongjio and the others obviously wanted to obtain the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn's Ice Flame Snow Crystals. Nyetian definitely wouldn't allow this to happen. TQR1, he had painstakingly saved the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn from Lan Diawu. How could he let it die at the hands of Murongjio and the others? I'll risk it. In the next moment, Nyetian's eyes flashed as a heavenly ice rheumatism appeared in his hand. Nyetian, what are you doing? When Fat Cat saw this, she suddenly reacted and couldn't help but cry out. It's time to increase my strength. The corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched as a strange light flashed in his eyes. He said, Lulu, prepare to release the power of the Saint Spirit Blood Yuan. PFFF. After speaking, he tilted his head back and directly swallowed the heavenly ice rheumatism. Nyetian, this. The little Fat Cat was taken aback and let out a strange cry. He already knew that Nyetian wanted to swallow the heavenly ice rheumatism. He wanted to stop him, but he was a step too late. Chapter 29:51. Nyetian directly swallowed the heavenly ice rheumatism and immediately felt an extremely violent power surge within his body, attacking his martial body's 100 meridians. In an instant, the pain spread throughout his body, and he couldn't help but roar like a wild beast. Nyetian. Lulu was stunned for a moment before he reacted and growled. He had originally thought that Nyetian would find an opportunity to slowly absorb the power of heavenly ice rheumatism. Who would have thought that Nyetian would be so ferocious and swallow the heavenly ice rheumatism whole? Even if Nyetian's martial body was strong, he couldn't play like this. Lulu. At this moment, Nyetian let out a low roar. His entire face instantly became distorted under the intense pain, and his facial features became as ferocious as a wild beast. Heavenly ice rheumatism was an item that was the polar opposite of ice and fire. The power contained within it was unimaginable. Nyetian directly swallowed the heavenly ice rheumatism which was a huge impact on his martial body. At that moment, the power of the heavenly ice rheumatism was released. Nyetian felt that the violent power in his body had actually transformed into two types of power. One was blazing like fire, while the other was cold like ice. QL11 in an instant. He felt as if he was in a place of ice and fire. The impact of this terrifying power was much more violent than when he was in the ice-fire lake. However, it was also fortunate that he had cultivated in the ice-fire lake before. His martial body was very adaptable to the impact of the two extremes of ice and fire. Nyetian, hold on. At this time, Lulu calmed down and shouted. He then began to release the power of the Saint Spirit Blood Yuan. A white halo shone on Nyetian's forehead, looking extremely strange. Boom! In the next instant, the powerful energy of the Saint Spirit Blood Yuan was released. It was like a broken dam, crazily rushing forward, incomparably frightening. At this moment, Nyetian felt as if his entire body was about to be torn apart. The pain that seeped into his bones caused him to howl miserably. This kind of pain seemed to seep into every inch of his flesh, every bone, and every meridian. It was simply unbearable. If his temperament was slightly weaker, he would have fainted by now. However, at the same time, the aura around Nyetian's body skyrocketed crazily. Waves of violent energy rushed into the void. It was extremely terrifying. Who is it? Just at this moment, several figures rushed over. When they saw Nyetian in midair, they shouted. When these people saw Nyetian's painful appearance, they couldn't help but stare blankly. They didn't know what was going on. Brad, it's you. Then, Murongjio recognized Nyetian and growled. His eyes were filled with coldness and murderous intent. 19th young master, you know this brat? The other members of the Mu clan couldn't help but look at Murongjio and ask in surprise. It's this brat who killed Mu Fu. Murongjio growled, not concealing the murderous intent in his heart. So it's him who killed our people from the Mu clan. A Mu clan martial artist sneered and said, 19th young master, let me kill this brat. Don't be anxious. Murongjio saw that Nyetian was in great pain, but he waved his hand to stop that person and said, what's wrong with this brat? Why is he in so much pain? Moreover, his aura is constantly skyrocketing. Could it be that he consumed a high-grade Yuan burst pill? At this moment, Nyetian's strength was skyrocketing, and he was in great pain. There was a violent force rushing through his body, which was a sign of consuming the Yuan burst pill. 19th young master, this brat definitely consumed the Yuan burst pill. We should kill him now. Otherwise, it will be troublesome if his strength increases too much. A Mu clan martial artist looked at Nyetian and reminded Murongjio. Do it. Murongjio's eyes darkened, and he growled to the person beside him. He knew that Nyetian's strength was strange. If he really relied on the Yuan burst pill to increase his strength, he might not be easy to deal with. Therefore, it was better to kill Nyetian as soon as possible, lest more trouble arose. Little bastard, die for me. In the next moment, a Mu clan martial artist spoke in a cold tone. His figure moved, and he violently slapped out with his palm. The terrifying palm shadow was like a huge mountain pressing down on Nyetian. Nyetian was in midair. His eyes were as red as a wild beast's, but the corner of his mouth suddenly twitched. Human sword slashes the stars. In an instant, the star's heaven slash appeared in his hand. With a roar, he directly slashed out with his sword. Boom! Bang! Sword intent surged, and the sword shadow whistled out. Where the sword light flew, it descended on the huge palm shadow. The void suddenly trembled, and the huge palm instantly collapsed. In the next moment, the sword shadow whizzed past, and the Mu clan martial artist did not even have time to scream before he was drowned by the sword shadow and died on the spot. The Mu clan martial artists below were stunned by the scene in front of them. They all gasped, and their eyes could not help but tremble as they looked at Nyetian. The Mu clan martial artist who attacked just now had the strength of a second-stage demi-saint. How could he be killed by Nyetian with a single slash? and Nietion was clearly just a six-stage demi-saint. Six-stage demi-saint. Morongyo was also shocked, and then he growled, and his expression became extremely ugly. When he met Nietion not long ago, the latter was still a third-stage demi-saint. How could Nietion have the cultivation of a six-stage demi-saint in just a few days? Even if Nietion took the Yuan burst pill, he could not have become so strong. Morongyo had seen with his own eyes that when Nietion was a third-stage demi-saint, he had killed Mu Fu, a first-stage demi-saint, with a single slash. Therefore, it was not surprising that Nietion could kill a second-stage demi-saint with a single slash now that he was a sixth-stage demi-saint. But the weirdest thing was that Nietion's strength was still skyrocketing. It was as if there was an inexhaustible abyss of power within Nietion's body, and he was constantly absorbing it. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and kill him. Morongyo immediately calmed down and growled. The other Mu clan martial artists reacted, and their faces darkened as a dozen of them moved at the same time, striking at the same time. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, countless violent forces appeared in the air, piercing through the air and blasting towards Nietion. The weakest of the Mu clan martial artists was a first-stage demi-saint, and the strongest were fourth-stage demi-saints. When they attacked at the same time, they could threaten an advanced demi-saint. But right now, Nietion was standing in the air like a berserk beast, his entire body's aura skyrocketing. Blood devours the heavens. Just as the endless attacks were about to land, Nietion slashed out with the starry heavenly slash in his hand. Sword will and blood chi surged in the air, and a blood-colored sword silhouette that was over 10,000 meters long appeared. Like a dragon in the nine heavens, it rolled over with a crushing momentum. The dozen Mu clan martial artists could not help but feel a terrible pressure in an instant, and their faces could not help but change. Boom! In the very next moment, the blood-colored sword silhouette exploded with unstoppable power. A terrible rumble echoed in the air as the violent attacks were directly drowned out by the sword silhouette. Bang, bang, bang. Then the sword silhouette fell, and the dozen figures were sent flying. Even when they were still in the air, their bodies could no longer withstand the impact of the sword will, and they were directly shattered into bloody light. Chapter 2952. Morongyo's eyes trembled as he stared at the bloody light in the sky. Apart from shock, there was also deep fear in his eyes. He could not imagine that Nietion's sword could unleash such a terrifying power. After all, Nietion was only a half-saint at this moment. Morongyo, it's your turn, Nietion said. His blood chi surged violently, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. Brat, even if you take the Yuan explosion pill, you're only a sixth-rank half-saint. I'm not afraid of you. Morongyo shouted in a deep voice. Is that so? Nietionling smiled coldly. His body shook, and a violent aura soared into the sky. Morongyo was shocked. Nietion's strength had increased again. He was a seventh-rank half-saint. How is this possible? Even if Nietion took the Yuan explosion pill, it was impossible for his strength to increase so much. Die, you piece of trash. Morongyo did not understand what was going on. He roared and moved. A terrifying icy aura surged from his body. He could see that Nietion's aura was still increasing. He had to act quickly. If Nietion's strength continued to increase, it would become more and more disadvantageous for him. Hua! In the next moment, Morongyo struck out with his palm. Icy aura surged from his body, and a huge icy palm appeared in the sky. It pressed down on Nietion. Triple saintly defiance. Earth sword engulfs the moon. Upon seeing this, Nietion didn't even try to dodge. Instead, he let out a low roar, and the sword intent within him surged to the extreme. Then, he swung his sword, and his sword's shadow whistled through the air like a roaring dragon. Boom! When the palm and the sword collided, there was a terrifying explosion in the air. The surrounding space became stagnant. The wind and snow in the air turned into sharp blades under the impact of the violent force. They danced wildly in the air and left deep marks on the surrounding rocks. Bang! At this moment, the sword image was finally unable to hold on any longer. It shook violently in the air and instantly shattered. Bang! Then, with another muffled sound, Tion's figure flew out and smashed heavily into the boulder behind him. Suddenly, blood and sword will burst out, and the surrounding snow melted. Humph, humph, humph. Morongjio severely injured Tion with a palm strike, and he immediately sneered and said arrogantly, "You piece of trash! Even if you consume the explosive yuan pill, use forbidden arts, and ignite your vitality, so what? You are still not this young master's opponent. You're dead meat today." As he spoke, Morongjio took a step forward, but in the next moment, his body froze on the spot. He saw Tion, who was covered in blood, rising to his feet. Moreover, Tion hadn't just stood up, his strength had actually risen once more to the 8th rank of the half-saint realm. Tui, Tion abruptly stood up and spat out a mouthful of filthy blood. His eyes were Morong, and he glared at Morongjio as he coldly said, "Morongjio, you're dreaming if you think you can kill me." Morongjio's palm strike just now was indeed very powerful. Even though Tion's strength was at the 7th rank of the half-saint realm, he still could not take it head-on. After all, Morongjio was a 7th-ranked demi-saint. More importantly, Morongjio was a martial artist of the ice attribute, and his strength had improved tremendously in the Arctic snow mountain. QL11 still, Tion's martial body was so powerful that he could still stand up even after being hit head-on by the giant palm. Moreover, the heavenly ice rheumatism and the blood yuan of the saint's spirit were still supplying him with energy. That was why his strength had risen from the 5th rank to the 8th rank in a very short time. Could an 8th rank demi-saint fight Morongjio, a 7th rank demi-saint? "Brat, you've angered me." Morongjio looked at Tion. Sensing the disdain in Tion's eyes, Morongjio let out a wild roar. His aura surged, and an extremely cold aura spread in the air, as if to freeze everything. "Make your move. Show me what you've got." Tion was not afraid at all. He smiled cold and was extremely arrogant. "You're courting death." Morongjio roared madly and raised his palm. An ice vortex that contained the terrifying power of ice appeared in his palm. "Ice Lotus Bloom, kill." In the next moment, his lips curled into a cold smile as he murmured. Then, he moved his palm and thrust it out. Kaboom! Crack, crack, crack. The ice vortex whistled out and actually exploded in the air. A terrifying cold energy instantly spread out, and an ice lotus that was like an ice mountain appeared. A terrifying cold energy was released, freezing the entire space. Huh? Tion frowned, and his expression changed. He had to admit that he had underestimated Morongjio's strength. "Go to hell." At that moment, Morongjio roared, and the ice lotus instantly expanded. Cold air filled the air, and everywhere it passed, the space was directly frozen. Astral Soul wings appeared behind Tion's back. Just as he was about to retreat, he found that the space around him was already filled with cold air, and his Astral Soul wings were directly frozen by the cold air. Crack, crack, crack. In the next moment, before he could even react, the space around him was directly frozen. He himself was also enveloped by a terrifying cold aura and was firmly trapped. Ha ha! Morongjio laughed wildly when he saw that Tion was frozen by the ice lotus. He shouted, "Brat, you've been sealed by the ice lotus, and your meridians will soon collapse under the impact of the cold air. Do you think you can survive this time?" Tion frowned. He forcibly burned his blood and chi, and at the same time, combined with the power of the stars, barely allowed him to move a little. However, the cold air in the surroundings mercilessly seeped over and slowly seeped into his martial body. Instantly, he felt the flow of blood in his body slow down, and his meridians began to freeze. Even the 9 dragon veins had a faint layer of ice crystals. "What a strong cold air!" Tion exclaimed in his heart, and his expression was very ugly. He didn't expect Murong Jio's ice lotus to be so strong that it could actually freeze his yuan meridians. Brat, the taste of the frozen ice lotus doesn't feel good, right? Murong Jiu looked at Niet Tian viciously and said in a cold tone, "This is the power of my Mu clan's bloodline. You should feel honored to die under this power." Ha ha! At the end of his words, Murong Jiu laughed wildly again. "Is that so?" Niet Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he sneered, and then the corners of his mouth formed a strange arc. Huh? Murong Jio's eyes darkened, and his expression changed. Only then did he realize that Niet Tian had actually advanced to the 9th rank half-sage while he was sealed in ice. His eyes were filled with shock, and he couldn't understand what was happening in front of him. What did Niet Tian do? How could his strength keep increasing? The Yuan Burst Pill could only increase a martial artist's strength once, and it was definitely not the case with Niet Tian. "Murong Jio, since you want to play, I'll play with you." Niet Tian was sealed in ice, but he smiled coldly. He then raised his palm with difficulty, and an icy blue ball of light appeared on his palm. It was the Heavenly Ice Rheumatism. Chapter 2953. Celestial Ice Rheumatism appeared on Niet Tian's palm, scaring the fat cat so much that it yelped. How could the fat cat not see that Niet Tian was about to consume another celestial ice rheumatism? Niet Tian had just consumed a celestial ice rheumatism, and the clash of the two extremes of ice and fire had pushed his martial body to its limits. And now, if he swallowed another heavenly ice flowing flame, how could his martial body withstand it? My ability is already at the level of a demi-saint, so why risk it again and ascend to the tier of demi-saint in one go? Niet Tian's mouth twitched as he coldly said, "After all, the blood yuan of a saint's soul is very rare." He could feel that the energy of the blood yuan of a saint's soul was still lingering in his body and was far from being completely absorbed. If he did not absorb that energy now, it would be lost for nothing. Such a waste was not in line with Niet Tian's personality. "Niet Tian, don't you dare." The fat cat was taken aback and cried out, but it was already too late. Niet Tian opened his mouth and consumed another celestial ice rheumatism. "This fellow is a lunatic, a complete lunatic." The Ghost Emperor stared blankly for a moment before crying out in shock. He had seen countless insolent people in his life, but none as fierce as Niet Tian. Niet Tian was basically gambling with his life if there was even the slightest chance. In truth, Niet Tian was gambling with his life because he could feel that the yuan meridians in his body were slowly freezing, and even if he had the ability of a demi-saint, he would not be able to break free of the glacial lotus's seal. Therefore, he could only consume another celestial ice rheumatism and borrow the momentum of the celestial ice rheumatism to break free of the glacial lotus's seal. What is that? Murong Jiu stared blankly for a moment when he noticed the celestial ice rheumatism in Niet Tian's hand. Although he did not know what the celestial ice rheumatism was, he could sense a very frightening presence from it. He guessed that the reason why Niet Tian's ability kept improving must be related to the celestial ice rheumatism. But at this time, when the heavenly ice flowing flame entered his body, Niet Tian's body suddenly trembled. A terrifying power rushed out of his body like a primordial wild beast, as if it was going to tear his martial body apart. Crack, 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 crack. In that very instant, an explosion resounded from within Niet Tian's body. His frozen meridians, qi, and blood began to move once. How? Murong Jiu was Tian. Ice Tian, translated editor Murong Tian. What on earth was that thing that Niet Tian had swallowed that could even neutralize his frigid aura? The heavenly ice rheumatism was an item of the two extremes of ice and fire. It contained the aura of both ice and fire at the same time. It was not surprising that it could break through the extreme cold qi. Boom! In the next moment, Niet Tian's body shuddered as a terrifying aura shot up into the sky, causing the frozen space around him to tremble. Crack, crack, crack. Immediately after, Violent dragon chi gushed out of his body, and the surrounding frozen space cracked little by little. Trying to break my frozen ice lotus? Impossible. At this time, Murong Jiu let out a strange cry, and then an ice vortex appeared on his palm again. It left his hand and turned into a frozen ice lotus in the air, covering Nietian. Roar! But right at this moment, a deep dragon roar rang out from Nietian's body. It was majestic, and the might of a dragon could shake the world. Boom! Then, in the dragon chi ocean behind him, a giant dragon appeared. Its huge body tumbled, stirring up the heavens and the earth. Boom! Boom, boom, boom. In the very next instant, the surrounding frozen space began to crumble, and it soon spread to the giant frozen ice lotus. With a dull rumble of thunder, it directly exploded. Roar! The crimson dragon shot into the air and bellowed at the heavens, the power of thunder surging over its body in a majestic and awe-inspiring sight. Dragon chi could weaken space in the first place, and with Nietian's ability having skyrocketed to the threshold of demi-saint, the power that the crimson dragon could unleash was imaginable. Blarg! In the instant that the two frozen ice lotuses exploded, Murong Jiu's body shuddered, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. On the other side, Nietian's figure shot into the air with a stomp and landed on the crimson dragon's head. Still, his current state appeared very frightening. His entire body was dripping with blood, and there were actually innumerable wounds all over his body as if he had been cut by thousands of sharp blades. At this moment, he had borrowed another surge from the heavenly ice rheumatism and the remaining power of the blood essence of the saint spirit to successfully ascend to first-level demi-saint. Even so, such a forceful breakthrough had caused great damage to his martial body, which had actually caused his body to break apart. If not for the 900 billion stars supporting his body, he would have been a pile of meat by now. Even if Nietian was suffering great pain at the moment, he was very happy and excited. Whatever the case may be, his ability was now first-level demi-saint. To him, it was a pleasant surprise, and he had to thank Murong Jiu, who stood before him, for that surprise. If not for Murong Jiu's insistence, Nietian would not have taken a risk of consuming a second heavenly ice rheumatism. You. Murong Jiu steadied his body, his face as white as a sheet, and left speechless in shock. He simply could not believe that Nietian had actually broken through his frozen ice lotuses and ascended to the threshold of demi-saint. He would never have believed it if he had not witnessed it with his own eyes. Who would have believed that a fifth-level demi-saint could ascend to first-level demi-saint in such a short time? Even those martial artists who had fused with powerful legacies would have to spend untold years to completely fuse with the power of legacies and improve their ability. Could Nietian be a monster? To think that he could ascend to demi-saint in the blink of an eye. Standing atop the dragon, Nietian's body shuddered as the bloodstains on his body were washed away, and the wounds on his body began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Murong Jiu, didn't you want to kill me? He growled at Murong Jiu with a menacing gaze and cold eyes. Murong Jiu's eyes were trembling, his teeth chattering, and he could not even speak. At the moment, his frozen ice lotuses were broken, and he was gravely injured, no longer having the strength to fight. Moreover, Nietian was already a first-level demi-saint, and Murong Jiu might not be a match for Nietian, even if he was at his peak. Take your 1 inch of. Nietianling sneered and took a step forward. The dragon beneath his feet vanished as he appeared right in front of Murong Jiu. What are you doing? Murong Jiu stared at Nietian and felt the murderous intent in the latter's eyes. He was so scared that his face turned pale, and his entire body was already drenched in sweat. I've killed so many martial artists of the Mu family. Do you think I'll let you live? Nietian said flatly as he approached Murong Jiu. I beg you, don't kill me. Murong Jiu's eyes trembled in fear, and his knees buckled as he knelt right away. He was still young, and he did not want to die. Would you spare me if you were me? Nietianling laughed, and an austere sword surged out of his body, instantly shrouding Murong Jiu. Chapter 2954. Secret. Nietion's eyes lit up when he heard Murong Gio's words. He smiled and asked, "What secret?" "I want you to promise that you won't kill me after I tell you," Murong Gio said in a trembling voice as his eyes flickered when he saw that Nietion had stopped. The corner of Nietion's mouth twitched. He said cold, "Young Master Mu, do you think you have the right to negotiate with me now?" Murong Gio was stunned. He didn't expect Nietion to be so overbearing. "Speak." Nietion's face was as calm as water as he spat out one word cold. "I'll speak." Murong Gio looked at Nietion and finally nodded. He said, "We found a holy chi whirlpool." Holy chi whirlpool? Nietion's eyes narrowed. He couldn't help but be stunned. He didn't know what holy chi whirlpool was. Holy chi whirlpool. This is good stuff. At this moment, the fat cat's excited voice sounded. "Fat, what is a holy chi whirlpool?" Nietion frowned and asked in confusion. A holy chi whirlpool is a whirlpool of life energy emitted from a sacred world seed. Fat Cat smiled proudly. During the early stages of formation, the sacred world seed is very unstable. Occasionally, saint energy will gush out and dissipate into the outside world, forming a holy chi whirlpool. You can think of it as the holy aura vortex as a diluted sacred realm seed. Nietion's eyes narrowed when he heard what Fat Cat said. Excitement appeared on his face. The sacred world seed was a saint energy whirlpool, and a holy chi whirlpool was also a saint energy whirlpool. It was just that the saint energy inside was far less concentrated than the sacred world seed. Nietion, a holy chi whirlpool is definitely good stuff? The holy chi liquid you used before was mostly refined from a holy chi whirlpool, Fat Cat said excitedly to Nietion. "All right, this divine whirlpool is mine." Nietion smiled faintly, his eyes filled with determination and greed. He had personally experienced the benefits of the Saint Chi liquid. If he could obtain a Saint Chi whirlpool and place it in the 9 superbs, wouldn't there be a large amount of Saint Chi liquid in the future? "If you don't kill me, I'll take you to the holy aura whirlpool," Murong Gio said as he looked at Nietion. "Are you here to inform the Mu clan?" Nietion looked at Murong Gio and asked with a faint smile. Murong Gio was stunned for a moment, then he nodded. He didn't expect Nietion to be so smart that he could even guess this. He and the dozen or so Mu family warriors had gone out to inform the Mu family. They originally thought that there wouldn't be any danger, so they didn't have any experts following them. Actually, if they didn't take the initiative to provoke Nietion, nothing would happen to them. However, after Murong Gio saw Nietion, his murderous intent was aroused. That was his own fault. Nietion smiled faintly and said, "Wait here first, I'll be back soon." As he spoke, he directly left and walked towards the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn. Coming to the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn's side, Nietion sensed the latter's aura. It was considered stable. Fortunately, the battle just now didn't affect the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn, otherwise it would be troublesome. TQR1 Nietion smiled faintly and walked to the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn's side. He took out the Heavenly Ice Rheumatism and placed it by the Snow Unicorn's mouth. Roar! The Ice Flame Snow Unicorn roared, its 2 huge eyes shining brightly. Then it opened its mouth and swallowed the dozen or so Heavenly Ice Rheumatism. Even Nietion dared to swallow the Heavenly Ice Rheumatism raw. The Ice Flame Snow Unicorn, which possessed both ice and fire attributes, naturally wasn't afraid of the Heavenly Ice Rheumatism's violence. After the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn consumed the Heavenly Ice Rheumatism, the 1,000-edge sword wool in its body slowly dispersed, and the wounds on its body began to heal gradually. Roar, roar! At this moment, the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn roared and stared at Nietion with its bright eyes, looking pitiful. Nietion was speechless. This big guy actually knew how to act cute. It obviously wanted more Heavenly Ice Rheumatism. Nietion wasn't stingy. He took out another dozen or so Heavenly Ice Rheumatism and fed it to the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn. After a while, the wounds on the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn's body had basically healed. However, its body was still a little weak, and it needed a rest for a while. Nietian looked at the big guy in front of him and couldn't help but murmur, "You're still a child, and you can already fight against an 8th order pseudo-sage. How terrifying will your battle strength be when you mature?" Roar, roar. The ice flame snow unicorn roared twice, as if it understood Nietian's words. "All right, big guy." Nietian laughed and patted the ice flame snow unicorn's head. He stroked the scarlet mane on its forehead and said, "I'm leaving. You can go back to the cave." Roar. Woo woo. The ice flame snow unicorn looked at Nietian and actually started to moan like a spoiled puppy. Its eyes were watery. Nietian shook his head and smiled. He patted the ice flame snow unicorn and got it to stand up. He naturally wanted to bring the ice flame snow unicorn away, but the space within the 9 extremities was too small. Moreover, the ice flame snow unicorn was an ancient beast, and it was better for it to live in the Arctic snow mountain. The ice flame snow unicorn's huge body stood up and walked towards the depths of the valley, turning back 3 times with every step as if it was reluctant to leave. Nietian watched as the ice flame snow unicorn entered the cave, and only then did he relax. "My lord, this is the ice flame snow unicorn. Why didn't you kill it and take its ice flame snow crystals?" That was when Morong Geo came up to Nietian and asked cautiously, "Let's go. Take me to the sacred aura vortex." Nietianling gave him a cold stare and said somberly instead of answering, "Yes." Morong Geo quickly nodded, not daring to be disrespectful. Then Morong Geo led the way, and the two headed towards the depths of the Arctic snow mountain. Along the way, Nietian secretly examined his martial physique. His strength had risen to the 1st level of a demi-sage, and his martial physique had become even stronger. More importantly, his 9 extremities war god art had ascended to the 3rd level of the water extreme Yuan heavenly realm, which was a great boost to his overall combat ability. However, with the improvement of his strength, the holy soul curse in his body had also risen from the 1st level to the 2nd level. The holy soul curse was an extremely powerful pressure on his martial physique, but such pressure was not a bad thing for his cultivation, and could actually speed up his cultivation. Moreover, the biggest improvement that his strength had brought was the awakening of the power of the 9,000 divine demons in his god demon nascent embryo to 1,000. The power that 1,000 divine demons could burst out in an instant was simply unimaginable. By Nietian's estimation, his current combat ability was enough to take on a high-level demi-saint, and he might even challenge a demi-saint of the 8th or 9th level. "My lord, we're here." That was when Morong Geo stopped and pointed at a valley in front of them. "The sacred aura vortex is in the valley ahead." Nietian's eyes narrowed, and he used his divine sense to feel the extremely intense presence of holy power. Excited, he grabbed Morong Geo and quickly walked to the entrance of the valley, where he saw a gaseous vortex floating in the air from afar. That intense presence of holy power was emanating from that vortex. Chapter 2955. Holy Aura Whirlpool. Nietian gazed at the vortex in the air above the valley. Before he could say anything, the little fat cat and the ghost emperor's excited voices rang out in his divine sense. "Who is it?" But at this moment, a deep and powerful voice suddenly sounded in the valley, like a muffled explosion. Hearing this voice, Nietian could not help but narrow his eyes. Judging from the aura, this person was definitely a strong cultivator. "Fourth uncle, save me." Hearing this voice, Morong Geo's eyes trembled with excitement, and he shouted in surprise. Boom! Then, in the next moment, a violent and terrifying power whizzed out and blasted straight at Nietian. Nietian frowned and reacted quickly. Wings of Star Soul appeared on his back, and he retreated with Morong Geo. The violent power roared like thunder and whizzed over his head. Luckily, he reacted in time. Otherwise, if he was hit by this power, he would have been injured. Nietian landed and looked outside the valley. A middle-aged man in gray appeared in front of him. His aura was violent and his eyes were fierce. "Fourth uncle." Morong Geo saw the man in gray and shouted with burning eyes. This middle-aged man was none other than his fourth uncle, Mu Hongshan. However, when Mu Hongshan saw Morongjio, his face was dark and cold. Morongjio, did you bring this kid here? Fourth uncle, save me. He forced me to do this. Morongjio shouted in panic. Oomph. Mu Hongshan, however, laughed coldly and roared wildly. Morongjio, you sure have guts to actually bring outsiders here. Do you know what this holy aura whirlpool means to our Mu family? Fourth uncle, I know I was wrong. Please save me. Morongjio shouted and was about to cry. Save your strength and don't shout anymore, Nyetian said coldly. This fourth uncle of yours won't save you. Morongjio looked at Nyetian and was stunned. His eyes were filled with fear. Nyetian could tell just now that it was impossible for Mu Hongshan to save Morongjio. If Mu Hongshan had the heart to save them, he would not have directly acted just now. If it weren't for Nyetian's quick reaction, he and Morongjio would have been in danger. One had to know that Mu Hongshan was a rank 1 pseudo-sage. One could imagine the power of his palm strike. From that palm, it could be seen that Mu Hongshan didn't want to save anyone. Mu Hongshan looked at Nyetian, smiled cold, and said, Brat, you're pretty smart. Unfortunately, you shouldn't have come here. You're too naive. With your strength, do you really think you can covet the sacred Qi whirlpool? Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly, but his face remained calm. He had indeed been a little careless. The Mu family would definitely have left behind experts to protect something like the sacred Qi vortex. His current strength had indeed increased tremendously, but it was still too much for him to take on this rank 1 pseudo-sage before him. Idiot! Go to hell! The next moment, Mu Hongshan suddenly growled and then struck out with his palm. A huge hand of ice appeared in the air, and like a mountain, it pressed down on Nyetian. Nyetian's eyes narrowed. Wings of Star Soul appeared on his back, and he frantically retreated with Morongjio. Boom! Feeling the power of the hand of ice weaken slightly, the sword intent in Nyetian's body surged, and he struck out with his sword. Boom! The next moment, the sword shadow bombarded the hand of ice, and with an explosion, the sword shadow collapsed. However, under the impact of the sword shadow, a crack appeared on the hand of ice. Nyetian's figure moved, and he suddenly moved forward, passing through the crack. Huh! Seeing this scene, Mu Hongshan's eyes narrowed, and his expression was very surprised. He didn't expect Nyetian's strength to be so strange, and Nyetian's cleverness was also beyond his expectations. Stinking brat, you have some skills. The next moment, Mu Hongshan's eyes darkened, and he sneered. The killing intent that surged out of his body became even stronger. It was hard for him to imagine that a first-level demi-saint could actually survive his hand of ice. My skills are not limited to this. Nyetian smiled faintly, and the corner of his mouth raised into a strange curve. Fourth uncle, save me. But at this moment, Morongjio suddenly moved, and with a loud shout, he ran straight toward Mu Hongshan. The sudden turn of events caused Nyetian's expression to flicker. He wanted to pull Morongjio back, but it was too late. Trash! Mu Hongshan saw Morongjio running over, and his face suddenly darkened, and then he struck out with his palm. Fourth! Boom! Morongjio's pupils shrank, and his small face was extremely shocked. But before he could shout out the last word, he was directly hit by the giant palm, and turned into a bloody light in the air. Even in death, he could never have imagined that his own fourth uncle would directly kill him. Your fourth uncle is really ruthless. Nyetian saw the scene in front of him, and his eyes darkened slightly as he growled. TQR-1 Mu Hongshan had just appeared, and he had displayed a strong killing intent. However, when Morongjio killed Morongjio, Nyetian was also surprised. The two were uncle and nephew. Did Mu Hongshan not have any kinship in his heart? Oof. Mu Hongshan smiled cold and said, Does Morongjio not deserve to die for revealing the Mu family secret? But he didn't die by my hands, he died by yours. Nyetian's brows furrowed, and he immediately understood. This Mu Hongshan wanted to shift the blame onto him. Kid, it's your turn now. Mu Hongshan smiled coldly and said, "But don't worry, I will leave your corpse intact." Yet Tion's eyes darkened, and there was actually cold contempt in his eyes. "Are you so sure that you can kill me? You only have the strength of a level 1 demi-saint. In my eyes, you are trash. Killing you is as easy as killing an ant for me." Mu Hung Shan smiled coldly, and then the aura around his body surged. Waves of violent ice power roared in the air, cold and murderous. It seems that everyone in the Mu family is an ice attribute martial artist. Tian faintly smiled as he felt Mu Hung Shan's aura. Mu Hung Shan's strength was stronger than Murongjiu's, but his talent was far from the latter's. At least in terms of bloodline power, Murongjiu was much stronger than Mu Hung Shan. Mu Hung Shan only had the strength of a level 1 demi-saint because he had lived for many years. "Stinking brat, you still dare to be arrogant when you are about to die. You are courting death." Mu Hung Shan felt the contempt in Nie Tian's eyes, and he couldn't help but become furious. His figure moved in a flash, and the cold aura around his body soared to the extreme. Humph. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, and a strange smile appeared on his face. He murmured, "The one who is courting death is you." As his voice fell, the demonic and divine power in his body instantly surged, flowed through his body, and gathered toward the demon eye. Nie Tian hadn't used the demon eye for a long time, and the power of his eyes was already full. Chapter 29:56. Nie Tian looked at Mu Hung Shan, the corners of his mouth curling into a cold smile. He was about to use the demonic eye. Fat Cat had mentioned that the power of the demonic eye was closely related to the divine and demonic energy awakened in Nie Tian's body. To put it simply, the more divine and demonic energy awakened, the more powerful the demonic eye would be. The power of the demonic eye was triggered by the divine and demonic energy. "Die, you bastard!" Mu Hung Shan looked at Nie Tian and vaguely sensed something, but he did not take it to heart. Instead, he let out a low roar and violently thrust his palm at Nie Tian. He did not believe that a first-level demi-saint trash could cause any waves in front of him. Boom! Mu Hung Shan's palm was powerful and vast, and the endless cold air around him rolled out like raging waves. It instantly condensed into an enormous icicle in the air and came crashing down. TQR 1-inch crack, crack, crack. Wherever the enormous icicle passed, the space was frozen, and the snowflakes that filled the sky were turned into ice crystals. Nie Tian immediately felt the powerful pressure and the bone-chilling coldness coming at him, which caused his gaze to freeze. However, there was not a hint of fear on his face. Instead, his smile became even more sinister. "You're dead, you little bastard." Mu Hung Shan roared as he stared at Nie Tian with his venomous eyes in midair, as if he could already see the scene of Nie Tian being smashed into pieces by the icicle. Boom! It was at this moment that Nie Tian's right eye suddenly trembled. Then, an enormous power of the eye surged out, causing the air to tremble slightly. Whoosh! In the next instant, a cold black radiance shot out from Nie Tian's right eye. Like an arrow released from a bow, it was swift and fierce to the extreme. The moment the black radiance pierced through the air, an incomparably dark aura spread and filled the space within tens of thousands of meters. The entire world suddenly darkened, as if night had descended. Mu Hung Shan suddenly felt a killing intent that seeped into his bones. His expression could not help but change, and his entire person actually became sluggish for a moment. Bang! Crack, crack, crack. At this moment, the murderous black light descended from the sky and bombarded the huge ice all. It directly penetrated the ice all, and the sound of cracking could be heard in the air. The 10,000-meter-long icicle suddenly exploded and shattered in the void, turning into cold air and dissipating. And at this moment, Mu Hung Shan's pupils fiercely shrank as the fear in his heart was perfectly written on his face. At this moment, he felt a sharp killing intent, and the aura of death was approaching. Pooh! In the next instant, a cold and severe black light tore through the air and attacked. It swiftly passed by an inconceivable speed and directly pierced through Mu Hongshan's chest. Pooh! Mu Hongshan's body fiercely trembled as he violently spat out a mouthful of blood. Then he lost control of his body and directly fell down. He heavily smashed onto the icy ground and died on the spot. At this moment, at the entrance of the valley, a dozen or so Mu family martial artists saw this scene and uniformly froze, their hearts shocked to the extreme. A first-level demi-saint instantly killed a first-level demi-saint. If they had not seen such a scene with their own eyes, who would have believed it? Nie Tian's figure descended and stared coldly at Mu Hongshan's corpse, a cold smile hanging on the corner of his mouth. To be honest, even he himself did not expect the power of the demon eye to be so terrifying. His original plan was to use the demon eye to heavily injure Mu Hongshan, and then he could fight Mu Hongshan head-on. But what surprised him was that the demon eye actually killed Mu Hongshan in an instant. But at this moment, a trace of blood seeped out of the corner of his right eye, which was caused by overexhaustion of his eye power. He had underestimated the power of the demon eye, which was why he used all his eye power. If he had known that the demon eye was so terrifying, he definitely would not have used so much eye power. Now that the demon eye's eye power was completely exhausted, it would probably take half a month to replenish it. It was also the greatest weakness of the demon eye. Every time he used it, he would have to wait another half a month before he could use it again. Nie Tian's ability had improved too quickly, and he had suddenly awakened 1,000 strands of demonic and divine energy. It was only normal for him to misjudge the power of the demon eye. That was when Nie Tian abruptly looked up, his chilling gaze locking onto the dozen or so Mu family martial artists. Run! It was only then that the Mu family martial artists finally reacted and promptly cried out as they scattered in all directions. Nie Tian could not help but narrow his eyes at the sight. The Mu family martial artists all had the strength of demi-saints and were no match for Nie Tian, but their scattering left Nie Tian in a difficult position. He could not kill everyone at once. Forget it. Let's go take a look at the sacred chi vortex. Nie Tian smiled bitterly and gave up. He naturally knew that the sacred chi vortex in the valley before him was the most important thing. With a flash, Nie Tian directly entered the valley. Such a concentrated presence of sacred power. Sensing the sacred chi vortex at such a close distance, Nie Tian's eyes could not help but tremble as he exclaimed inwardly. The sacred chi vortex before him was 500 meters wide, and it floated in the air like a behemoth that was continuously absorbing the divine energy around it. Nie Tian could clearly sense that the presence of divine energy in the entire valley was very thin. Even so, the presence of sacred power in the valley was extremely concentrated. The sacred chi vortex originates from the sacred world seed, inheriting its attribute of absorbing divine energy around the world. Within the sacred chi vortex, there is a core of sacred power condensed from sacred power, which could incessantly convert the absorbed divine energy into sacred power. The fat cat's voice rang as it explained. If that's the case, then the sacred chi vortex is a super powerful formation that produces sacred power. Yet Tian's eyes trembled, and he could not help but gulp. If I could get my hands on the sacred chi vortex, wouldn't I have an endless supply of sacred power? Yet Tian, you think too easily. The fat cat laughed. Even if there is a core of sacred power within the sacred chi vortex, the rate at which it is converted into sacred power is very slow. According to my observation, the amount of sacred power that this sacred chi vortex can convert in a day is at most equivalent to 1 drop of sacred chi liquid. 1 drop of sacred chi liquid. Nie Tian could not help but exclaim in delight as his eyes heated up at the fat cat's words. He knew firsthand how useful the sacred chi liquid was. If the sacred chi vortex in front of him could produce 1 drop of sacred chi liquid every day, it would already be very good for him. Nie Tian, the sacred power that is converted from the core of sacred power will fill the sacred chi vortex in the form of sacred chi. Even a half-saint God Pill Master would need several months to extract a drop of sacred chi liquid from the sacred chi vortex. The fat cat sighed. Hearing the fat cat's words, Nietion's face froze, and he could no longer smile. He was being too idealistic. It turned out that the power of the sacred chi vortex still needed to be extracted before it could be converted into sacred chi liquid. If I get my hands on the sacred chi vortex, wouldn't I have to bring a God Pill Master with me at all times? After a while, Nietion became cold and asked with a frown. Yes, the fat cat nodded. It would not waste time to extract the sacred chi liquid for Nietion. Chapter 29:57. When Nietion heard Liolio's words, he couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. He didn't quite understand what Lulu said. That's right. At the same time, little fat cat let out a strange cry, as if it had suddenly realized something, and said in surprise, "Why didn't I think of that? That's not a bad idea." The blood seal of the Holy Spirit can indeed be merged with the core of holy power. Ghost Emperor's voice rang out, unable to hide his surprise. Nietion, on the other hand, was dumbfounded. He still didn't understand. Nietion, the blood seal of the Holy Spirit can absorb all kinds of energy, then refine it and store it in the blood seal for you to absorb. Fat Cat began to explain. And the core of holy power can absorb the divine energy of heaven and earth and convert it into holy power. Think about it. What would happen if the blood seal of the Holy Spirit and the core of holy power were merged together? Nietion's expression changed when he heard Fat Cat's words. He was extremely happy. The blood seal of the Holy Spirit could absorb all kinds of energy, and the core of holy power could convert divine energy into holy power. If the blood seal of the Holy Spirit and the core of holy power were merged, wouldn't the blood seal of the Holy Spirit be able to convert the absorbed energy into holy power? Moreover, this holy power could be directly absorbed by Nietion, just like the holy chi liquid. After understanding all this, Nietion's eyes instantly lit up. He stared at the holy chi whirlpool in front of him with uncontrollable greed. Even a powerful force like the Mu family valued the holy chi whirlpool so much, let alone Nietion. All right, I'll transfer the holy chi whirlpool to the 9 superbs now. Nietion's lips curled into a smile, and he stepped forward, ready to make his move. Wait! However, at this moment, little Fat Cat suddenly cried out in shock. Nietion's body froze, and he instantly retreated. At the moment when Fat Cat screamed, Nietion felt a hidden murderous intent surging in the air. After he retreated, the murderous intent actually disappeared miraculously. What's going on? Nietion frowned and asked in surprise. He had clearly sensed the entire valley just now and did not sense any strange aura, but why did he feel a terrifying killing intent when he approached the whirlpool of holy aura? It's the Saint Energy Sealing Array. The Fat Cat said with a gloomy expression, after the sacred world seed is born, it will automatically protect itself. It will condense a protective formation in the surroundings, which is commonly known as the sacred energy formation. Just like some mysterious objects of the heavens and earth, they are protected by a formation or a divine beast, right? Nietion's eyes narrowed as he asked. Yes. The Fat Cat nodded and continued. The holy aura whirlpool is emitted from the holy world seed, so it also carries a holy power restrictive formation. With your perception, it's impossible for you to detect the existence of the Saint Energy Forbidden formation. If you had taken another step forward, you would have become a corpse. Nietion's face stiffened, and he gulped down a mouthful of saliva with lingering fear in his heart. He was too rash. If the holy aura whirlpool was not protected, the people from the Mu clan would have taken away. Why would they stay here and watch over it? Fat, Ghost Emperor, do you have a way to break this Saint Energy Forbidden formation? Nietion's face darkened as he asked in a low voice. For what the Fat Cat said, the Saint Energy Forbidden formation was extremely terrifying, and they could only rely on him and Ghost Emperor. I do have a way, but with your strength, you may not be able to break the Saint Energy Forbidden formation. The Fat Cat's face darkened as she said, moreover, it will take some time to break the Saint Energy Forbidden formation. The people from the Mu clan have already escaped, and they should be here soon. That's a little troublesome. And yet Tion frowned, and his face darkened. With his strength, it would be difficult for him to break the Saint energy forbidden formation alone. Yet Tion, looks like you'll have to ask Shui to come out for a while. The fat cat said in a low voice. Share. And yet Tion's eyes trembled, and he was a little hesitant. It was true that Shui was very strong, but Hua Yiru had warned him not to let Shui reveal herself. Therefore, even when they were facing Murong Jiao and Mu Hongshan, Nie Tian had never thought of letting Cher take action. Nie Tian, this is the Arctic Snow Mountain. There won't be anyone else here. The fat cat knew what Nie Tian was thinking and said in a low voice. All right. Nie Tian thought for a while and finally nodded. After all, the holy aura whirlpool was too tempting. He would not be willing to give it up just like that. Then, Nie Tian asked Cher to come out from the Nine Superbs. The fat cat's figure appeared immediately, and it explained the situation to Cher. In the end, it said, Little girl, the Saint Energy Forbidden Formation is very dangerous. Without my order, you must not take action, understand? Understood. Cher nodded, and her clear and bright eyes looked at Nie Tian. She was very happy to be able to help Nie Tian. All right, get ready. We will start immediately. The fat cat smiled faintly, and then its figure moved and it came to midair, and its fat body began to release glazed qi continuously. Streams of glazed qi flowed in the void and slowly outlined the lines of the Saint Energy Forbidden Formation. TQR1 Yetian and Shui couldn't help but marvel at this scene. The fat cat was indeed powerful to be able to deconstruct the structure of the Saint Energy Forbidden Formation so clearly. Done. After a while, the fat cat let out a deep breath. It had successfully constructed the entire Saint Energy Forbidden Formation. After all, the holy aura whirlpool was not a sacred world seed, so the Saint Energy Forbidden Formation outside, it was relatively simple. Following this, the fat cat continued to release glazed qi, and soon, a small godly formation was constructed. Little Shui, stand inside the godly formation and attack the Saint Energy Forbidden Formation according to my instructions. The fat cat looked at Cher and nodded. Shui, smiled faintly, then stepped into the crystal formation. Nie Tian's eyes flickered. He was curious to see what the fat cat was going to do next. Nie Tian, go outside the valley now. Remember, do not let anyone near the valley. However, at this moment, the fat cat said to Nie Tian. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, and then smiled and walked out of the valley. Seeing that Nie Tian had left the valley, the fat cat was slightly relieved, and then looked at Cher and said, Little girl, follow my instructions. Do not make any mistakes. Cher nodded, and her eyes were filled with confidence. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Then the fat cat raised both of its paws and continuously slapped the Saint Energy Forbidden Formation. However, its intention was not to attack the Forbidden Formation, but to control Cher's attacks. Cher's eyes focused, and a blood-red long sword appeared in her hand. It was her bloodline sword, God-slaying. She raised her arm, and although it was an ordinary movement, it exuded a terrifying aura. Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, the God-slaying sword attacked, and the crimson sword rays followed the traces of glazed qi, bombarding the Saint Energy Forbidden Formation. This was the first time Cher used the God-slaying sword after merging with the Heavenly Sacred Heart, and she used it on a forbidden formation. Chapter 2958. Standing outside the valley, Nie Tian could hear the rumbling coming from the valley from afar. He did not dare to be careless and stood guard outside the valley. Then, the rumbling in the valley became louder and louder. Ripples of formation power spread out and surged in the space. Such powerful ripples of formation power. I really can't fight against such power, Nie Tian said to himself as he felt the ripples of formation power. Even though he was a first-stage demi-saint, he was still weaker than Cher. If it were not for Cher, he would not have been able to do anything to the sacred Qi vortex. After a long time, The rumbling in the valley did not weaken. Instead, it was getting louder and louder. The sacred force sealing formation is really powerful. It's so hard to break it. Nyetian frowned and murmured. At the same time, in the valley, boom, 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 streaks of crimson sword aura whizzed out and bombarded the sacred force sealing formation. The sword aura flickered in the air, and the formation patterns flowed. At that moment, beads of sweat were dripping from Cher's forehead. Even though she had the meridians of 3 lives and the Wan Jian bloodline, she would not be able to hold on much longer under the constant consumption of sword will and power. Little ass, hang in there. The seal is about to break. Little fat cat looked at Shui, its cat face filled with anxiety. If Cher's power ran out and she could not continue attacking, then the sacred force sealing formation would quickly recover, and all the previous attacks would be in vain. That was why Cher had to hold on. Yeah, Cher nodded heavily. There was a faint blush on her delicate face. She was obviously very nervous. Boom! At that moment, a violent sound was heard from outside the valley. It sounded like a thunderclap. Oh no! Fat Cat's heart sank, and she could not hide the panic on her face. It was obvious that someone had arrived outside the valley and had clashed with Nyetian. Now, she could only hope that the intruder was not too strong and that Nyetian could handle it. Outside the valley, more than 10 figures appeared. Each of them was filled with killing intent as they stared at Nyetian. The leader was a gray-robed old man. He looked at Nyetian with a gloomy expression and said in a cold voice, "Kid, get out of the way." "Impossible." Nyetian looked at the gray-robed old man and said coldly. As soon as they arrived outside the valley, they attacked Nyetian. It was fortunate that they were not all that powerful. Most of them were low-level demi-saints, with only a few being at the 6th level. As for the gray-clothed old man in the lead, he was only a first-rank half-saint. "Kid, do you think this master doesn't know what's in this valley?" The gray-robed old man looked cold at Nyetian and said in a deep voice, "There's a St. Chi whirlpool here, right?" Nyetian frowned, and his expression changed. "This master is a half-saint divine array master. I would never be wrong about the ripples of a sacred barrier." The gray-robed old man smiled cold and said, "Kid, if you get out of the way now, I might even reward you with a drop of St. Chi liquid if I'm in a good mood. If you don't get out of the way, don't blame me for being ruthless." Nie Tianling smiled coldly, his gaze as firm as steel as he said in a deep voice, "As long as I'm here, no one should even think about taking half a step into the valley." The fact that the gray-robed old man was a half-saint divine array master was something that Nie Tian did not expect. Array masters were rare, and those who could reach the level of half-saint were even rarer. Nie Tian had met a half-saint divine array master, Mu Shui Jing, back in the Frozen Ruins. That fellow was known as the best divine array master in the Frozen Ruins, but Mu Shui Jing lost a bet and became Nie Tian's disciple by accident. Moreover, Nie Tian had even given Mu Shui Jing the blueprint of the formation of the Ghost Emperor's tomb. And now, another half-saint divine array master had appeared in front of him. It appeared that the gray-robed old man was not a nobody in the sacred spirit domain. Even so, Nie Tian did not care about the gray-robed old man's identity. Anyone who dared to approach the valley would be killed without mercy. "You talk big, kid." The gray-robed old man smiled cold, but his gaze soon trembled and revealed a blazing heat. He could already sense that the ripples of the formation within the valley were becoming more and more powerful, as if the sacred barrier was about to be broken. He guessed that the one breaking the formation within the valley must be a master of array, and above that would be a half-saint, or perhaps even a demi-saint. Even in the entire sacred spirit domain, there were only a handful of demi-saint array masters. The reason he did not attack Nie Tian until now was because he was worried that the master of array in the valley was of such high status that he could not afford to offend him. "You can try," Nie Tianling replied coldly, his eyes overflowing with killing intent. One of the martial artists behind the gray-robed old man took a step forward and stared at Nie Tian cold as he said, "Elder you, there's no need to waste your breath on this kid. Let's kill him right away." The gray-robed old man was named Yu Hongnian, an inner elder of the Yu family, and held a very high position in the family. He had entered the Arctic snow mountain ahead of time, not only to observe the terrain of the entire mountain, but also to search for the sacred Qi whirlpool. After all, the sacred world seed of the Arctic snow mountain was recently discovered, and there would definitely be many sacred Qi whirlpools within the entire mountain. Still, he was very unlucky as he did not find any sacred Qi whirlpools. He had been with the main group of the Yu family, but when he suddenly sensed the ripples of the sacred barrier, he hurried over with a few martial artists of the Yu family. That was how the scene unfolding before his eyes happened. Yu Hongyan looked at Nie Tian, but he waved his hand to stop the martial artist of the Yu family. He was a half-step divine array master, and he knew very well how difficult it was to break the sacred barrier. So he was certain that there must be an array master in the valley, and that person's attainment in array formations was definitely not below his. A person with such attainment in array formations must have a very high status. TQR1, therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, he was not willing to offend the person inside. However, the sacred barrier was about to be broken, and he was absolutely unwilling to leave at this time. Senior inside, Junior Yu Hongyan took the liberty to come here and take a look at the sacred Qi whirlpool. I hope Senior can make things convenient for us and let us in. After thinking for a moment, Yu Hongyan shouted towards the valley. He did not dare to force his way in, so he wanted to be polite before resorting to force. However, after his voice fell, there was no response from the valley, and only ripples of array power spread out, as if mocking Yu Hongyan. Yu Hongyan waited for a long time and did not get a response. He frowned and shouted again. However, the result was the same. There was still no response. Don't shout. The master in the valley will not respond to you, Nie Tian said with a faint smile. Of course, he could see that Yu Hongyan was afraid of something, so he spoke according to the latter's thoughts. Senior, if that's the case, then don't blame Junior for being rude. Yu Hongyan's old face became gloomy, and he shouted. The corners of his mouth twitched, and he spat out 2 words coldly. Do it. Chapter 29:59. Understood. The dozen martial artists behind Yu Hongyan responded in unison, their voices booming like thunder. Then, a dozen pairs of eyes glared at Nie Tian as ferocious as wolves. It was then that Yu Hongyan's eyes narrowed, and he suddenly said, Don't hurt him. Just make him back off. Although he was forced to act, he was still fearful of offending a master of arrays, which was why he did not dare to let the martial artist of the Yu family hurt Nie Tian. The martial artist of the Yu family was taken aback, but he still nodded helplessly, not daring to disobey Yu Hongyan's order. In their eyes, a first-level demi-saint like Nie Tian was not worth mentioning, and any one of them could easily crush Nie Tian. Brat, if you know what's good for you, get lost. One of the martial artists of the Yu family stepped out and roared coldly with a wild aura. You're the one who should get lost. Nie Tianling laughed. His body trembled, and a sword aura shot into the sky, turning into a violent blast in the air, the rolling aura causing the space to tremble. Bang! In the next moment, a muffled sound resounded. The Yu family martial artist didn't even have the time to react before he was blasted flying by the sword force. He drew an arc in the air and smashed heavily onto the icy ground. The sudden turn of events caused the expressions of Yu Hongyan and the others to change at once, the shock in their hearts written all over their faces. How could they have imagined that Nie Tian could heavily injure a second-level demi-saint with just his sword aura? How was that possible? Yu Hongyan could not help but exclaim when he came to his senses. He was very doubtful that the silver-haired martial artist standing before him was really a first-level demi-saint. Elder Yu, I didn't ask them not to hurt me just now. Those words saved your lives. Nie Tian looked at Yu Hongyan and smiled faintly. His expression was calm, but it gave off the impression of incomparable insolence and dominance. Indeed, if Yu Hongyan had not said those words, Nie Tian would not have shown mercy to the Yu family. His ability was enough to crush all the martial artists of the Yu family before him. Arrogant. At this moment, one of the Yu family cultivators was enraged. With a loud roar, his figure flashed, and he directly sent out a palm strike. A vigorous palm force blasted towards Nyetian. You overestimate yourself. Seeing this, Nyetian let out a low shout and the starlight heaven chop appeared in his hand. With a sweep of his sword images whizzed out and directly shattered the palm images in the air. Bang! Immediately after, there was another muffled sound, and that family cultivator flew backwards. After landing heavily on the ground, he spat out a mouthful of blood and could no longer get up. Although Nyetian's sword didn't take his life, it directly crippled his yuan meridians. The reason why he attacked so fiercely was to give the Yu family martial artists enough shock. Yu Hongyan was taken aback at first, but he quickly reacted. Looking at that cultivator, his face instantly stiffened and his heart sank to the bottom. That martial artist was a level 6 demi-saint, and yet his yuan meridians were so easily crippled by Nyetian's sword. It was simply inconceivable. How could Yu Hongyan not see that Nyetian did not use his full strength? Otherwise, those two Yu family martial artists would not have survived. At this moment, the other Yu family martial artists were looking at Nyetian. Their faces no longer had the ferocity and insolence from before. Instead, it was replaced by deep fear and dread. Nyetian was simply too powerful, so powerful that they could not understand it. Elder Yu, can you leave now? Nyetian withdrew his sword aura and asked Yu Hongyan with a faint smile. Yu Hongyan's old face was stiff and ugly, and it took him a long time to react. Unwilling to accept this, he looked at Nyetian and said, "Young man, this old man would like to wait here and meet the array master in the valley. Is that all right?" "Meet?" Nyetianling smiled coldly and said, "I'm afraid you won't be able to leave alive after meeting her." There was no array master in the valley, only Cher and Fat Cat. If Yu Hongyan were to meet Cher, Nyetian would not let him leave alive. Yu Hongyan was a demi-saint array master, and his senses were far beyond the average person's. It was very possible that he could see through Cher's identity. Well, Yu Hongyan's face stiffened and became extremely ugly. He believed that Nyetian was afraid that the array master's identity would be exposed. Wouldn't the Yu family know who had the sacred chi vortex then? Elder Yu, if you don't leave now, don't blame me for being impolite. Nyetian didn't want to waste any more words with Yu Hongyan. He sneered, his eyes surging with chilly, killing intent. Yu Hongyan's eyes trembled, and panic appeared on his face. He quickly nodded and said, "Young man, thank you for your mercy just now. Yu Hongyan of the Yu family will remember this." After saying that, he did not stay any longer and left with the Yu family warriors. "Remember?" Nyetian looked at Yu Hongyan's back and said with a faint smile, "Yu Hongyan, do you remember my kindness? Or do you remember me as a person?" Seeing Yu Hongyan's figure disappear completely, Nyetian heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, there were no experts around Yu Hongyan, otherwise it would be troublesome. TQR1, however, Nyetian speculated that Yu Hongyan's status should not be low, otherwise it would be impossible for him to enter the Arctic snow mountain in advance. At this time, Nyetian felt that the array power in the space was extremely violent and had reached its peak. Could it be that the sacred power forbidden array has not been broken yet? Nyetian asked doubtfully, worried that Fat Cat and Cher might have encountered an accident. His figure moved, and he walked towards the valley. In the valley, Fat Cat was extremely nervous. The array pattern of the sacred power forbidden array had been completely destroyed, and the forbidden array was successfully exposed. But at this time, Cher was almost out of energy. Her little face was as pale as paper, and she was approaching the limit of her martial body. "Little Shui, destroy the array with the last strike." Fat Cat looked at Cher and said in a low voice, "Yes." Cher nodded, and her beautiful eyes surged with incomparable determination. In the next moment, her body shook, and streams of blood chi shot out from her body. Her energy was exhausted, and she spontaneously ignited her blood chi. "Cher!" Nyetian saw this scene from afar, and he could not help but exclaim in his heart, "Boom!" At this time, Cher stabbed out with her godforsaken stab, and a blood-colored sword shadow appeared. The aura was not strong, but it contained great power. In an instant, it bloomed and bombarded the forbidden array. Boom! Boom! In the next moment, the sword's shadow fell and directly bombarded the array. After a loud bang, the sacred power forbidden array collapsed. At this time, Cher's body went limp, and she could no longer support herself. Cher, are you okay? And yet Tian saw that, and he flew over and coincidentally caught Cher in his arms and shouted anxiously, "Nye Tian, I helped you break the forbidden array." Cher's little face was as white as a sheet, but there was a happy smile on her face. Her beautiful eyes looked at Nye Tian seriously and said, "Yes, yes." Nye Tian nodded, and then released the energy of the earth vein source to help Cher recover. After a while, Cher's complexion improved a little, and Nye Tian asked her to return to the 9 superbs. "Nye Tian, little Shui is fine. She just used up too much energy. She will be fine after a few days of rest." Fat Cat looked at Nye Tian, took a deep breath, and said, "But her energy was not wasted. The sacred power forbidden array has been broken." Chapter 2960. Nye Tian looked at the sacred chi whirlpool and smiled. Cher's efforts were not in vain after all. She had successfully broken the sacred force sealing array. Nye Tian, transfer the sacred chi whirlpool to the 9 extremities, Fat Cat said with a smug smile. Liolio's fusion with the sacred force core was obviously not something that could be done in an instant, so Nye Tian had to transfer the sacred chi whirlpool to the 9 extremities first. All right, Nye Tian nodded firmly and was ready to move. However, it was at that moment that a deep and powerful voice resounded in the void. "Young man, you shouldn't have taken something like the sacred chi whirlpool." As the voice echoed out, a cyan-robed figure appeared in the air above the mountain valley. He looked at Nye Tian with his beady eyes and a smile on his face. Nye Tian frowned as he looked at the newcomer in the air. It was a skinny old man who was not very strong and was merely a demi-saint. However, his aura was a little strange, as if he had fused with the void where he was. "Nye Tian, that's a pseudo-saint god alchemist." Fat Cat's voice rang out at that moment, reminding Nye Tian. A pseudo-saint god array master. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, as he was quite surprised. Yu Hongyan was a demi-saint god array master just now, and he did not expect another pseudo-saint god alchemist to show up now. In fact, it was not all that surprising. After all, the commotion when the sacred force sealing array was broken was too great, and these powerful god array masters and god alchemists would naturally be able to sense it. Nye Tian did not expect this unassuming old man to be a pseudo-saint god alchemist. "Young man, I advise you to put down the sacred chi whirlpool." The green-robed old man smiled wretchedly and moved, landing directly in the valley. He stared at Nye Tian and said, "Of course, I won't let you suffer a loss. I'll give you a drop of Saint Chi liquid. How about it?" "A drop of Saint Chi liquid?" Nye Tian looked at the green-robed old man and could not help but laugh. This old fellow was deceiving him like he was a 3-year-old child. He wanted to trade a drop of holy chi for a holy chi whirlpool. This old thing really knew how to do business. "Young man, the sacred chi liquid is a good thing. It can help you increase your strength rapidly." The green-robed elder laughed, seemingly worried that Nye Tian didn't know the value of the sacred chi liquid. "Old man, I know what holy chi liquid is," Nye Tian said with a smile, raising his eyebrows. "Then what do you think? Do you want to trade or not?" The green-robed old man did not get angry. Instead, he chuckled and asked with a burning gaze. "Change." Nye Tian laughed and said, "As long as you give me 1,000 drops of Saint Chi liquid, I will give you this Saint Chi whirlpool." "Huh?" The green-robed old man was taken aback. His face darkened, and he screamed, "Brat, are you playing with me?" "I'm playing with you." Nye Tian's face darkened as well. He said in a cold tone, "You're clearly playing with me." "You." The green-robed old man's face darkened. He suddenly took a step forward and slapped Nye Tian with his palm. Suddenly, a gust of green chi appeared and enveloped Nye Tian. Eyebrows furrowed, Nye Tian activated his Star Soul shield to ward off the green aura. In the next moment, He took a step forward and stretched out his hand. Like a pair of iron pincers, he tightly grasped the green-robed old man's throat. He growled in a low voice, "Treacherous villain, how dare you use poison? Little brother, don't kill me." The green-robed old man was shocked by the sudden turn of events. He never thought that Nietian would be able to block the poison of his six-leaf green fungus. Moreover, Nietian's reaction was too fast. It was completely out of his expectations. After all, even a rank 9 demi-saint would not be able to resist the poison of his six-leaf green fungus. How could Nietian ignore it? "Don't kill you?" Nietian suddenly exerted strength in his hand and lifted the green-robed old man up. He said in a cold tone, "Give me a reason not to kill you. I'm from the Guild of Myriad Domains." The green-robed old man's throat was gripped. He stuttered as he finished his sentence. The Guild of Myriad Domains. Nietian's eyes narrowed when he heard those words. He was not afraid of the Guild of Myriad Domains. He was just worried that the old man was somehow related to Feng Qi. "What's your name?" Nietian asked in a deep voice as he relaxed his grip. "Cough, cough, cough. My name is Feng Shutong. I'm an elder of the Guild of Myriad Domains." Shutong coughed twice, his eyes slightly trembling. "Do you know a person called Feng Qi?" Nietian's eyes narrowed as he continued to ask. "Feng Qi? You know little Qi Zi?" Hearing Nietian mention Feng Qi, Shutong's beady eyes shone brightly. He said excitedly, "I'm little Qi Zi's elder. According to seniority, he should call me Grandpa Gio." Nietian's eyes darkened. He loosened his grip and let Shutong go. Judging from Shutong's reaction, he was not lying. Moreover, he called Feng Qi so intimately, which proved that he had a good relationship with Feng Qi. "You can leave." Nietian waved his hand and directly let Feng Shutong leave. Then, he took out Jiuji and carefully placed the holy Qi whirlpool inside. However, Shutong did not leave. Instead, he watched as Nietian put away the holy Qi whirlpool. His beady eyes widened in shock. Why aren't you leaving?" Seeing that Shutong did not leave, Nietian's face darkened as he asked cold, "Little brother, you're Feng Qi's friend, right?" Feng Shutong chuckled. The way he looked at Nietian gave people a feeling that he was up to no good. "Yes." Nietian nodded and walked out of the valley. After all, this place was not safe. Since he had already obtained the holy Qi whirlpool, of course he had to leave immediately. However, Shutong followed him. He squeezed out a smile and followed him eagerly. "Little brother, you're Feng Qi's friend. I'm Feng Qi's Grandpa Gio. We're very close. It's not normal. I'm good friends with Feng Qi, but I don't know you." Nietian sped up and said cold. But no matter how fast he went, Shutong could still follow him closely. "Little brother, aren't you treating me like an outsider? I've watched little Qi grow up. No matter how you look at it, half of the credit goes to me that he's able to make such an outstanding friend like you." Feng Shutong chuckled as he followed behind Nietian. Nietian was speechless. Feng Qi's Grandpa Gio was really shameless. Seeing that they were already far away from the valley, Nietian's figure paused. He looked cold at Shutong and said directly, "Old thing, don't follow me anymore. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." Then, his figure moved and he left. However, Feng Shutong persevered and actually caught up to Nietian again. He chuckled and said, "Little brother, don't be angry. I see that we're fated to be together, so I followed you. Look at me. Why don't I follow those cats and dogs? I'm begging you, go follow those cats and dogs." Nietian was speechless and stopped again. He looked cold at Shutong and said, "Old thing, why are you following me?" He. Shutong looked at Nietian and laughed foolishly. "Don't laugh, get straight to the point." Nietian's scalp went numb from Shutong's laughter, and he said directly, "Take your 1-inch little brother. I want to discuss a business deal with you." Shutong's face turned serious, but still looked wretched. "Speak." Nietian was too lazy to talk nonsense and said directly, "It's like this. I found a few Saint Qi whirlpools, but I have no way to break the Saint energy prohibition, so I want to ask little brother for help." Feng Shutong grinned. The wrinkles on his face were very obvious, and he said with a smile, "What did you say?" Nietian did not wait for Shutong to finish. His expression changed, and he shouted. He could not believe his ears. Shutong actually said that he found a holy whirlpool. Chapter 2961. Hearing Shutong's words, Nietian couldn't help but be stunned for a long time. Finally, he reacted and stared at the ladder with shining eyes. How is it? Are you tempted now? Seeing Nietian's reaction, Shutong couldn't help but smile proudly. The holy whirlpool was already very rare, not to mention that he had several holy whirlpools. It would be strange if Nietian wasn't tempted. Old thing, you aren't playing with me, are you? Nietian's face darkened slightly. A hint of coldness surged in his eyes. Feng Shutong looked like an old and frivolous man, which made him suspicious. Little brother, I, Shutong, am also a person of status. How could I trick a junior like you? Shutong's old face darkened, as if he was very angry. Humph. Nietian couldn't help but laugh, and said coldly, Who was it that ambushed me with poison just now? Just now. Shutong's old face stiffened. Then he chuckled and said, I was just joking with you just now. Plus, my six-leaf green fungus poison can only make people unconscious for a short time. It's not a poison that kills people. Really? Nietian's eyes were cold. He didn't quite believe Shutong. Would an old man like me lie to a little kid? Shutong was a little angry. He opened his old hand, and a green gas surged in the center of his palm. Nietian sensed for a moment. This green gas was indeed the poison that Shutong used to ambush him. Nietian, this poison is indeed not a deadly poison. Looks like this old man only wants the holy whirlpools. He doesn't really want to kill you. Fat Cat's voice sounded and said to Nietian, Okay, I believe you. The six-leaf green fungus poison is indeed not a poison that kills people. Nietian faintly smiled and said, Of course not. Shutong put away the six-leaf green fungus and mumbled, If I really wanted to kill you, how could you still be alive? Nietian didn't mind Feng Shutong's mutterings. Instead, he faintly smiled and said, Old man Feng, since you said you found a few St. Chi whirlpools, take me there. Wait. Feng Shutong's small eyes flashed, but he stopped Nietian, smiled, and said, Before we go, we have to talk about it first. I was the one who discovered the St. Chi whirlpool. You just helped me break the Saint Energy seal. Well, I'll give you a drop of holy chi liquid for every forbidden formation you break. What do you think? TQR1 asked. When Nietian heard Feng Shutong's words, his expression darkened. He really wanted to punch the latter's wretched face. Taking out a drop of Saint Chi liquid as a reward for breaking through a Saint Energy forbidden formation. Only Feng Shutong could say such a thing. Did this old thing really think that Nietian was a 3-year-old child who could be tricked like this? At this time, Feng Shutong noticed that Nietian's expression wasn't right. He couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth and said, Looking at you, you don't seem to be satisfied with the reward. How about this? I'll take a little loss. If you break through a Saint Energy forbidden formation, I'll give you 2 drops of holy chi liquid. Nietian's expression darkened. He glared at Feng Shutong with a murderous look. This old thing was obviously treating him like an idiot. 2 drops of holy chi liquid is not enough. You're too greedy. Feng Shutong looked at Nietian and suddenly shouted, as if he had really taken a big loss. Nietian was speechless. This old thing was greedy to no end, but now he jumped up and said that he was greedy. Half and half. In the next moment, Nietian's expression darkened, and he said coldly, What? Feng Shutong was stunned at first. Then, as if he had been struck by lightning, he jumped up and his voice became sharp and ear-piercing. He couldn't believe his ears. Nietian actually proposed a half and half with him. He had discovered 8 holy chi whirlpools, and this was the result of his hard work over the past few days. How could he let Nietian take 4? He, Feng Shutong, had made countless transactions with countless people, but he had never suffered such a big loss. I said half and half. If you don't agree, then stay away from me. Nietian looked coldly at Feng Shutong. After he finished speaking, he turned and left. Feng Shutong was stunned again. Then, he reacted and hurriedly followed. Only now did he know that he had met his match this time. When Nye Tian made a deal with others, he never took a loss. Little brother, wait a moment. We'll discuss it again. Feng Shutong followed behind Nye Tian and said hurriedly, half and half. There's nothing to discuss. Nye Tianling replied coldly. At the same time, he quickened his pace. Little brother, you are Little Qi Zi's friend. I am Little Qi Zi's ninth grandfather. We have a very close relationship. There's always room for discussion. Can't we talk calmly? Feng Shutong followed closely behind Nye Tian. He was so tired that he was panting. Nye Tian didn't say anything. He quickened his pace. Kid, there's no such thing as what you say in a deal. Feng Shutong was a little anxious. He said, how about this? I found 8 holy qi whirlpools. I want 7, and I'll give you 1. Is that okay? Nye Tian gave a cold laugh and didn't pay any attention to him. This old thing was too stingy. 8 holy qi whirlpools, but he only gave Nye Tian 1. I'll give you 2. Feng Shutong's old face changed. He gritted his teeth. Nye Tian's expression didn't change. He quickened his pace. I'll give you 3. Is that okay? Feng Shutong really made up his mind this time. His heart was bleeding. He growled. I'll say it again. Half and half. Nye Tian's figure suddenly stopped. He stared at Feng Shutong and said coldly. Feng Shutong was shocked by Nye Tian. The muscles on his face trembled. His eyes were filled with hatred. But in the end, he still nodded. This time, he had really met his match. Okay, let's go. Nye Tian's expression instantly softened. The corner of his mouth curled into a faint smile. Follow me. Feng Shutong was a little angry. He growled. His figure moved, and he led the way. Nye Tian, on the other hand, was very happy. He was going to get 4 holy qi whirlpools. About half an hour later, Feng Shutong brought Nye Tian to a valley. Nye Tian frowned. He didn't see any holy qi whirlpools. Old man, are you messing with me? His face darkened. He looked coldly at Feng Shutong. Step back. Feng Shutong's face darkened. He gestured for Nye Tian to step back. Then he took a step forward. His hands formed a strange seal. Lines of runes circulated in the air. A giant whirlpool slowly appeared in midair. It was the holy qi whirlpool. Old man, you sure have some tricks up your sleeve. You actually covered the holy qi whirlpool with a boundary. Nye Tian's lips curled up. His eyes twinkled. One has to admit that though Feng Shutong wasn't handsome, stingy, and sly, his boundary technique was really powerful. I didn't think that this old man was not only a god alchemist, but also a boundary master. Not simple. Fat Cat couldn't help but compliment. Feng Shutong removed the boundary and looked coldly at Nye Tian. He said, if I didn't hide the holy qi whirlpool, what would I do if others found it? Impressive. Nye Tian faintly smiled and praised Feng Shutong. Chapter 2962. Nye Tian looked at Feng Shutong and could not help but be taken aback. He then sent a voice transmission to Fat Cat. Fat, can you still deconstruct the structure of the Saint Force Sealing Array? That's not a problem. I've already deconstructed the Saint Force Sealing Array once. Although every Saint Force Sealing Array is different, they're mostly the same. The problem now is, who's going to break the array? Fat Cat's face darkened as he said awkwardly. He had experience deconstructing the Saint Force Sealing Array, so it was not a difficult task for him. The biggest problem now was, who was going to break the array? Feng Shutong only had the strength of a demi-saint, and his combat ability was far weaker than Nye Tian's. Although Nye Tian's combat ability was strong, he could not compare to Cher. Cher had just deconstructed a Saint Force Sealing Array and was now exhausted. She did not have the ability to deconstruct the array at all. Little Nye, don't tell me you don't know how to deconstruct the array. Feng Shutong's face darkened as he saw Nye Tian's awkward expression. Old man Feng, I can only deconstruct the structure of the Saint Force Sealing Array, but the power of the Saint Force Sealing Array is too strong. I can't deconstruct it. Nye Tian frowned and answered honestly. F***CK. Are you messing with me? Feng Shutong let out a strange cry and cursed when he heard Nye Tian's words. TQR1 Nye Tian's face darkened as he said, don't tell me that a pseudo-saint alchemist like you doesn't have anything powerful on you that can help us deconstruct the array. Brat, you're really pissing me off. Feng Shudong's face stiffened as he almost fainted from anger at Nie Tian. But then, his expression turned for the better, and he said to Nie Tian, "Hurry up and reveal the structure of the Saint Force sealing array." "Old man Feng, are you sure you can deconstruct the array?" Nie Tian looked at Feng Shutong and asked doubtfully. If Fat Cat could decipher the structure of the formation, but Feng Shutong couldn't, it would be very awkward. "Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up." Feng Shutong was almost angered to death by Nie Tian and said impatiently, "All right." Nie Tian agreed, and the sword wool on his body began to slowly surge. Then, under the guidance of Fat Cat, he used his sword wool to mark out the diagram of the Saint Power Forbidden Formation. Feng Shutong was dumbfounded by the sight. He couldn't believe the scene in front of him. Although he wasn't a God Array master, he had seen other God Array masters break arrays, and none of them were as smooth as Nie Tian. "It's done." After a while, Nie Tian smiled faintly as he deciphered the diagram. Actually, he didn't have to do much. All he had to do was follow Fat Cat's instructions and sketch out the diagram of the formation. "Little Nie, you're amazing." Feng Shutong looked at Nie Tian, and his old face was like a blooming chrysanthemum. He chuckled and said, "Such a young God Array master. This is the first time I've seen such an old man. I heard that the structure of the Saint Power Forbidden Formation is very complicated. Even a fake Divine Array master would need a long time to decipher it. You can decipher the structure so quickly. Don't tell me you're a fake rank 9 Divine Array master." "From what I know, the strongest God Array master in the Thousand Domains Guild is only a fake rank 6 Divine Array master." After saying that, Feng Shutong looked at Nie Tian with a strange expression. He couldn't believe that there was such a young, fake Divine Array master in this world. He even suspected that Nie Tian was the reincarnation of an Array master. "Old man Feng, what level of God Array master I am is not a problem for you to worry about. You should hurry up and decipher the formation." Nie Tian smiled faintly. "All right." Feng Shutong nodded and a scroll appeared in his hand. He unfolded it. The moment the scroll was unfolded, a surge of sword essence gushed out and condensed into a human figure in the air. When Nie Tian saw this, especially when he saw the face of the sword essence, he couldn't help but exclaim, "Senior Sword Sage." At this moment, the sword wool shadow that appeared beside him was the person he had met in the frozen ruins, Soaring Cloud Sword Saint Yin Yun. Feng Shutong exclaimed and smiled. "You know Yin Yun?" "Yes." Nie Tian nodded and said, "I met Feng Qi in the frozen ruins. At that time, Senior Sword Sage also went to find Feng Qi, so we know each other." "I see." Feng Shutong chuckled and said, "Let's begin. This is a sword essence clone of Senior Sword Sage? Can it really break the Forbidden Formation?" Nie Tian looked at Feng Shutong and couldn't help but worry. "Of course." Feng Shutong couldn't help but smile and said, "Yin Yun is a rank 8 demigod after all. Although this sword essence clone is much weaker than his main body, it still has the strength of a rank 5 demigod. It should have no problem breaking this forbidden formation." "Yes." Nie Tian was relieved when he heard Feng Shudong's words. Cher was only a rank 9 demigod, and yet she could break the forbidden formation. Since Yin Yun's sword essence clone had the strength of a rank 5 demigod, it naturally could break the forbidden formation. In fact, the scariest thing about the holy formation was its complex structure. As long as the structure of the formation was deciphered, it would be easy to break it. It was just that Nie Tian's strength was a little weak, which was why it was so difficult. If he were a rank 9 demigod, according to the diagram, he could destroy the formation I and break the forbidden formation with a single slash of his sword. Before, Cher had to destroy some of the formation patterns before she dared to attack the formation I because she was too weak. Boom! In the next moment, the sword intent doppelganger followed Nie Tian's instructions and thrust out its sword. A sword shadow whizzed out and bombarded the Saint Energy Restrictive Formation. Boom, boom, boom. Then, a series of explosions sounded, and the entire Forbidden Formation was destroyed. Although it was just a sword essence clone, The speed at which it broke the forbidden formation was much faster than Cher. That was the result of the difference in strength. Little Nya, the first holy chi whirlpool must be mine first, Feng Shutong said with a chuckle when he saw that the forbidden formation was broken. Sure, Nye Tian nodded. After all, there were still 7 holy chi whirlpools waiting for them. Moreover, Feng Shutong did put in more effort. Feng Shutong chuckled and took a step forward. He was about to use a space-time container to store the holy chi whirlpool, but he suddenly thought of something and stopped. Little Nya, I saw you put the holy chi whirlpool in a space-time vortex just now. If I'm not mistaken, that's an independent small world, right? He suddenly turned to look at Nye Tian and chuckled. Yes. Nye Tian nodded and smiled. If you're willing, I can help you put the holy chi whirlpool in Jiuji. What do you think? Although a space-time container with enough space could also store the holy chi whirlpool, during the process, some holy chi would inevitably be lost. However, it was different if Jiuji was used. Jiuji was big enough to store the holy chi whirlpool without losing any holy chi. All right, thank you. Feng Shutong thought for a while and nodded with a smile. He already had a lot of trust in Nye Tian and could let Nye Tian temporarily keep the holy chi whirlpool. Chapter 2963. 3 days later, in an ice valley on the Arctic snow mountain. Ha! The St. Force restrictive formation has been broken. In the ice valley, there was a burst of joyful laughter. It was Feng Shutong. Old Feng, this is the 8th holy aura whirlpool. We can finally rest for a while. Nye Tian looked at Feng Shutong and said with a faint smile. The two of them spent 3 days and finally took down the 8 holy aura whirlpools. Little Nya, quickly put the holy aura whirlpool into the 9 extremities. I really want to see what your 9 extremities look like inside, Feng Shutong chuckled. Feng Shutong chuckled. He had long been itching to enter the 9 extremities to take a look at what it was like inside. Don't rush. Wait for me to put the holy aura whirlpool into the 9 extremities first, Nye Tian said with a faint smile. He stepped forward and prepared to put the holy aura whirlpool into the 9 extremities. But at this moment, there was a sudden scream from afar. The scream was sharp and filled with panic. Nye Tian's expression changed. He said, Fat, I'll leave this to you. I'll go take a look. After saying that, he moved and rushed over. And behind him, the figure of Fat Cat appeared. The cat held the 9 extremities with its paw, but the cat's face was a little unwilling. Feng Shutong was stunned by the scene in front of him. He looked at Fat Cat in disbelief. His old face froze, and he couldn't speak for a long time. Fat Cat didn't pay attention to him and put the holy aura whirlpool into the 9 extremities. On the other side, in a snowy valley tens of thousands of meters away, an unsightly scene was unfolding. Go away, don't touch me. A delicate and thin girl in green screamed and quickly retreated. In front of her, there was a young martial artist with a lecherous smile on his face. He walked over step by step. Several black-clothed cultivators looked at the scene before them mockingly as they laughed maniacally. I didn't think that the beloved daughter of the Yu family would dare to enter the Arctic snow mountain alone. Isn't she tired of living? I heard that this little girl is the most beloved daughter of the Yu family's patriarch. Back then, when the patriarch went to the Yu family to propose marriage on behalf of the 7th young master, he mentioned this little girl. Unfortunately, the Yu family's patriarch refused this marriage. Who would have thought that this little girl would actually fall into the hands of our 7th young master? These black-clothed cultivators looked like they were watching a joke. Rongqi Wei, don't come any closer. If you dare to take another step forward, I'll kill myself in front of you. The green-clothed woman, Yu Rua screamed. Her eyes were already filled with tears. Yu Rua, it won't be that easy for you to die. Rong Chiwei chuckled and stretched out his hand. A gust of chi enveloped Yu Rua trapping her in place. Yu Rua suddenly felt that she couldn't move her body. Her delicate face turned as white as a sheet, and tears rolled down her cheeks. Yu Rua, your father rejected the marriage proposal of the Rong family. But now, aren't you still in my hands? Rong Shui took a step forward and suddenly reached out and tore off half of Yuruo's clothes, revealing her snow-white skin. Wow, this little girl is so fair and tender. The seventh young master is so lucky. We'll soon be able to see the seventh young master display his invincible might. It'll be a feast for our eyes. Hee. The seventh young master has countless women. This little girl is clearly still a virgin. I wonder if she'll be able to endure it later. The Rong family's cultivator said with a lustful look in his eyes and saliva dripping down to his chin. Rong Chiwei, if you dare to hurt me, my father will not let you go. Tears fell from Yuruo's eyes. She struggled with all her might, but she couldn't move at all. She was only at the pinnacle of a mortal state, while Rong Chiwei was a fifth-order demi-saint. The gap between the two was so huge that it couldn't be described with words. She couldn't even fight back against Rong Chiwei. Yuruo, don't you think it's ridiculous that you're still using the Yu family to scare me at a time like this? Rong Chiwei smiled coldly. His lustful gaze was like tentacles that wandered around Yuruo's body without restraint. As he spoke, he took a step forward and stretched a hand towards Yuruo's small face. Animal, let go of my miss. At this time, a voice suddenly rang out. Then, a figure charged over and slammed a palm towards Rong Chiwei. Ju-chun. Yuruo's beautiful eyes flashed as she looked at the figure and cried out in shock. The person who had attacked at this time was her personal attendant, Ju-chun. She had secretly entered the Arctic snow mountain without the Yu family's knowledge. She had only brought Ju-chun with her. Ju-chun was about the same age as her, but he was already a first-order demi-saint. Unfortunately, Ju-chun still couldn't fight back against Rong Chiwei at all. TQR 1-inch damned servant. You're courting death. Rong Chiwei suddenly turned around and roared fiercely. Then, he directly slammed his palm forward. Vigorous energy surged out and crashed towards Ju-chun. Rong Chiwei was a fifth-order demi-saint expert, so the power of his palm was extremely strong. Ju-chun was only a first-order demi-saint, so he couldn't withstand this palm at all. Without a doubt, if this palm landed, Ju-chun would die without a doubt. Boom! At this moment of life and death, a sword shadow suddenly pierced through the air and descended from the sky, blocking the fatal palm for Ju-chun. Moreover, Rong Chiwei was forced to take a few steps back by this sword shadow. He staggered and almost fell, looking extremely pathetic. Rong Chiwei steadied himself and suddenly raised his head. His gaze landed on a silver-haired martial artist. At this time, this silver-haired martial artist was looking at him with a gloomy expression, his eyes surging with murderous intent. Rong Chiwei's heart sank inexplicably, and he was extremely shocked. He's only a first-order demi-saint. Why do I feel like I'm falling into an abyss when he's staring at me? It must be an illusion. The next moment, Rong Chiwei calmed down. His eyes were extremely cold, and he said in a deep voice, Brat, who are you? Do you think you can poke your nose into the business of me, Rong Chiwei? Tian looked at Rong Chiwei, the corner of his mouth twitching, and he said with a faint smile, Sorry, I just like to poke my nose into other people's business, especially the business of scum like you. You. Rong Chiwei's face darkened. He didn't expect Tian to be so domineering and not take him seriously at all. Brat, don't you know who we are? We are from the Rong family. If you dare to offend our seventh young master, you're dead. At this time, one of the Rong family martial artists couldn't stand it anymore and started a clamor. Rong family. Tianling suddenly turned around and locked his cold eyes on that Rong family martial artist. He said coldly, I've never heard of the Rong family, but listen to me. Now either get lost or die. That Rong family martial artist was stunned by Tian's aura, and then his eyes turned cold as he roared, Brat, you're courting death. As soon as he finished, his figure moved, and he struck out with his palm, intending to kill Tian. This Rong family martial artist was a second-order demi-saint, and he was obviously relying on his superior cultivation to kill Tian. Whoosh! However, at this moment, Tian's body moved slightly. A flash of a sword flashed, and blood appeared in the air.